What is happening out there, Roto Scouts baseball fans? Good morning, gang. 11 a.m. or thereabouts, 11:01, 11:02. Got a little sidetracked, so I was looking at some Fangraph stuff. Been basically staring at that for the last 24, 36 hours, somewhere around there. Was just looking at Mr. Miguel Sano. For reasons unknown, outside of a hot spring, he's been the projected lineup for today anyway for the Angels. In that game that you guys are talking about a little bit in the chat there with the Orioles and the Angels squaring off on the FanDuel slate, but not the DraftKings slate. We ended up with closer slates than they thought. FanDuel was initially going at 305 to capture the high-profile Braves-Phillies game. And then the Angels and Orioles was coming along for the ride with that one. And the Phillies game rained out. The Mets and the Brewers game also rained out. Not currently raining, at least not when I went for coffee a couple minutes ago. Not currently raining here in the New York area. But we lose some exciting Braves players from the slate. We lose Spencer Strider from the slate. We lose guys like Jackson Chourio, although I don't think, I was saying before in Discord, I don't think that Mets game was on either slate initially. But regardless, always sucks to lose a couple games early, but hopefully, unlike somebody said in the Discord, hopefully it won't be getting like the NBA around here, and I don't think it will. Typically, we're only worried about little changes like this with the rain. Sometimes we've got to sweat post-lock rainouts. FanDuel, at least last year, was very generous in allowing you to swap out of postponed games after lock, which was good. But, yeah, we've got a lot to break down. We've got 9 games on FanDuel. We've got 8 games on DraftKings. We're starting up at 305 still with the lone game between the Angels and the Orioles. But let's say hi to everybody. First baseball show of the year. Gotta do it. Cujo's here. I am ready, Cujo. As you know, as you guys have been hearing me say for weeks now, I am ready for baseball season. Zero sleep since you guys saw me last. I was up all night knocking out content. I'm pretty sure, over 10,000 words for the game-by-game breakdown in the article today. Got projections up. Hitter projections are up on the site. Pitcher projections are up on the site. The hitter projections include a home run mark from the home run model for every single player on the slate. They're getting updated as confirmed lineups come out. Only confirmed one I've seen so far is the Reds. There were a couple changes from the initial projection, so I updated that before. Pitcher projections are there. Home run picks, just individual my picks, the usual one that you guys have had for going on several years now, going back to the Awesome Stochastic days. So just my general home run picks with my home run pick, my main guy of the day, and then one from each team. We've got the Power Index up on the site. Power Index just summarizes those home run opportunities for the full lineup. The top 6 give you a snapshot of where the home run potential is team by team as you're making stacks. And then stack rankings are up as well. That was the one I forgot yesterday when I was talking about it. I was saying, I know there's another one out there that I used to do. It was stack rankings. Stack rankings, they get a little funky just because it is using a just pure average of the top few guys. So the Yankees today, drawing a really strong top mark overall in projections, just kind of on the back of having the most number of guys with the highest projections. But it doesn't necessarily track that way in terms of it's not a great matchup against Framber Valdez, even though he was more gettable last season. We'll talk about all of this. But I'm just trying to put the tool in proper perspective. So yes, raw projection average, they're at the top, but you've got to understand that there's baked into that a big Juan Soto projection, a big Aaron Judge projection, so on and so forth. Other teams have a little bit more realistic opportunities. Not that the Yanks isn't realistic, but I don't know necessarily that if I was grading the stacks rather than just like purely ranking the averages, if I was like coming up with a grade, I don't know that I would have the Yankees number 1 against Framber Valdez. I think that's pretty fair, pretty obvious to most people out there. Framber is very good most of the time in limiting runs. But again, we will get into that. Let's keep saying hi to people because we got a bunch of people here hanging out already. Just a couple minutes into the show. Hopefully we're at a good time for everybody tuning in from work, the car, wherever. Hopefully we're ducking in between other popular shows and maybe we'll grab a little spot here. But Hunter Bone is here. Steven Leibowitz is here. Bird Nerd's here. Bird Nerd wants to know right out of the gate, who y'all stacking? Doesn't even stop to say hi. Just walks in the door. Just, who you stacking? Bird Nerd's here for the info. I love it. I'm a loser till I win. The Millies here. Lone Wolf is here. Lazy Mofos. We're back. Love it. Pinstripe Pimp. What's going on? Ducking 3. Jenna Sandy. Glad we're back too. Thank you. Lazy Mofos. Oh, well, same old Reds. Stay news friendly. Yep. Gotta love that. Get those lineups out early. Keep us all happy. Love that spot for the Reds. I think it's been mentioned a couple times already in the chat. But I was kind of hoping that it would go, a little bit unnoticed, but it's definitely chalky, definitely popular, and I am definitely going to have some of it. Josiah Gray, guy that we've been targeting for several years now in terms of DFS and firing away with bats against him. He was better last year than he had been the couple years before that for home runs in particular, but he's still very, very gettable. It is still Great American Small Park. There is a lot to like in that game, including just the raw skill on the Reds this year. There's a lot of talented kids on that Reds team this year. Hunter Bone likes Scooble over 7 Ks, easiest bet ever. I like that spot. I don't have anything to say about the only thing you could potentially run into is just innings. I basically capped all the pitching projections at 6 innings today. Not that everybody got 6 innings, but I didn't let anybody get beyond 6 innings just because most of these guys have still been working in like the 80-85 range in terms of pitch count. Some of them still working their way up to that level. And, I mean, we're already dealing with a league in which these guys don't typically pitch all that deep anymore in a lot of instances. First game out of the gate, a lot of teams are a little bit conservative about it. We saw that in the Soul series with pitchers coming out fairly early. So we've got a little bit of an artificial cap on guys, but yeah, I like Scooble to get to that number. The projection models got him right around there. If I gave him back what I took away from him in terms of those the innings, we'd be right on that mark. So I have no issues with Scooble at 7 Ks. Think it looks like a pretty good spot, and that is a soft White Sox team on the other side. Scooble's just very expensive DFS-wise, and I think there's going to be a lot of people there. Everybody loves Scooble this year. Coming into the season long, he was a big target in a lot of drafts. One of the guys that's the darling of the fantasy industry at large. Cole Ragan's also on this slate, is another guy that qualifies for that title. I believe in Scooble more than I believe in Ragans. I got to see it again from Ragans. I really do. He's on one of my teams, my team that I share with Lou and Mike. And he's on that team because I slept through our first round pick because it went off on it's a slow draft, right? It's slow email draft. Supposed to have a few hours to make your picks or whatever. And Lou just jumped the gun while I was asleep just because other people were pressuring him to get his pick made because it was the first round. And he took Cole Ragans. It's a keeper league, so like first round, he would have gone in the first, but wasn't my pick in the first. But anyway, he was terrific last year. Has significant upside. We'll get to it. Lone Wolf saying Cole Ragans hasn't been pitching too well in spring training. I take a lot of spring training with a grain of salt. It's definitely something you can point at least just very for something like this where there's just I'm talking all about last year. So you can say like, yeah, this hitter, maybe got his act together, showed up in camp 15 pounds lighter and hit 4 spring home runs, blah, 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 blah. That's Miguel Sano. But especially for pitchers, I don't put all that much stock in it. A lot of it is just getting the arm geared up, working out the kinks, finding your form. And they really don't care what the numbers look like in a lot of instances. Some of the younger guys working on specific pitches, things like that. So it's difficult to take a look at that. And then with the hitters, you do get, the factor of, in the famous words of Lou Brown, famous manager, Hall of Fame manager from the Cleveland Indians back in the day. This is a Major League 2 quote. Yeah, if a guy will be bagging groceries in 2 weeks, which is what he said when Willie Mays Hayes hit a home run off of a guy in spring training. So there's a lot of give and take. Now, the league's not exactly like it was in the 80s anymore, where most of those guys are going to go back to high-end minor league jobs, AA, AAA kind of gigs. A lot of them are high-end prospects. But some of the home runs that we've seen, some of the high averages, so on and so forth from spring training, definitely take with a grain of salt. Some of them can be encouraging when it's happening from a young kid to win a job. It's always a good thing to see, and maybe you can ride on that a little bit more. But things really, really, really change dramatically when we hit the regular season. Wild thing, says Todd Strong. Such a good. First one is an all-time classic. I'll stand up for the second one. It's not great. It suffered, I don't think it's R-rated. It suffered from that. It's got a couple chuckles in it. It suffered from not having Wesley Snipes pivoting to Omar Epps. Not that Omar Epps was bad, but not the same movie. The third one, no thank you. But the first one is an absolute all-time smash classic. Actually, it was just while I was bored punching up a quick list of must-watch movies. Must-watch baseball movies. Major League, Bull Durham, A League of Their Own, The Sandlot, Brewster's Millions, Field of Dreams, 8 Men Out, The Scout, 61, Rookie of the Year, which I was watching at like 3 o'clock this morning while I was writing the baseball article, Moneyball, 42, The Natural. We get a little thin toward the end of this list. For the Love of the Game, Mr. Baseball, Mr. 3000, Cobb, which is all right, Little Big League, Hardball, Summer Catch, and The Fan. I would not watch them in that order because those last few movies are going to be a real drag. But if you mix those up, you got some good stuff in there. But that was just my dashing off 20 movies off the top of my head that are baseball movies. Rosenbagger. Rosenpfeffer. So, first game on deck. Apologies to the folks on DraftKings. You can see on the left side of the screen, you do have projections for this one. So if you're plugging into the, if there's a showdown slate for it or something, feel free to use those. But no salaries or anything filling in for DK on the left side of the screen because this game's only on FanDuel. Got a little duel between the Los Angeles Angels and Mr. Corbin Burns. I don't think the Angels really hold up their end of the pitching bargain here. Patrick Sandoval's okay. 144 and 2/3 last year over 28 starts. Just a 19.6% strikeout rate and 11.3% walk rate. 4.11 ERA, but a 4.61 xFIP underneath that, and a really ugly 1.51 WHIP. He didn't give up many home runs. Was pretty good at checking power, pretty good at checking premium contact, just a 7% barrel rate against, 34.8% hard hits, just 87.6 miles an hour of exit velo against. This is all right here. For those unfamiliar, this is where I'm looking right now. And just 1.84% home run rate, but all of this is concerning, and there's no real upside, especially against a really good young team like the Orioles here. He's not going to go in there and find a bunch of additional strikeouts against this team. There are mid-20 strikeout rates across the board for the most part, but I don't think that Sandoval's really, especially first start of the season, coming off a 19% rate, probably not going to get there. He did have nearly a 24% rate year before in 148 and 2/3. So there's a little bit of potential upside. He was much, much better that season. 2.91 ERA and a 3.67 xFIP over 27 starts. Similar sample size year to year, but the more recent one is the one we care about a little bit more here. And I also do just agree with the folks in chat who were saying that the Orioles look like a decent stack. I like the pricing. Kind of depends on who's in the lineup. You could have some shake up here. But especially like a sneaky Cedric Mullins for 3,000. Cedric Mullins went 15-19 last year, which is okay for counting stats. Everything else was a mess. 233, 305. 233, 305, 416. Can't have my voice fail on the first game of the first show of the year. But Mullins is a former 30-30 guy. If you get any semblance of old Cedric Mullins on any given slate at 3,000, it's a pretty good price to have for him. Not an ideal spot in the lineup at the bottom of the lineup. Not an ideal matchup for him lefty-lefty, but figure you get 2-3 plate appearances against the pen. If he's hitting higher up in the lineup, so much the better. You've got a lot of talent up at the top of the lineup. Obviously, these four cost a fair amount. The 3,200 on Ryan Mountcastle definitely helps you be able to get to those four guys all together. Adley Rutschman, one of the top overall catchers in all of baseball, 687 plate appearances is completely bonkers from a catcher. That's unheard of catcher level just appearances, playing every day. Even like Will Smith is in like the 550s somewhere. Rutschman went 277, 374, 435. 127 WRC plus. WRC plus weighted runs created plus, you're weighted above or below league average for run creation, 100 being exactly league average, everything above. So this means he was 27% better than league average for creating runs last year. It's a fantastic option at catcher. Any given slate, Adley Rutschman is going to be a good one-off catcher. You're just going to have to pay for him. And I think that taking one-off catchers in a lot of ways, I'm typically going to be looking for the cheapo one-off catchers, just as like a lever to get to other things. Obviously on FanDuel, you don't actually have to play a catcher if you don't want to. It's more relevant on DraftKings. But it's definitely a guy to keep in mind and consider. At times, that price will keep people from doing that. So maybe he's a guy that you work in a reverse type of a lineup where you've got a cheap pitcher, 2 decent stacks where you need a one-off. You can get to an expensive one-off in that $37, not quite $4,000 range. Even though he's a catcher, he works well in that kind of a scenario, I guess is the right way to say that. Austin Hayes, pretty quality leadoff stick for $2,800. It's a very cheap price for him. He's an outfielder, reasonable production, 16 home runs last year, pretty decent triple slash created runs, 12% better than average. Has had similar seasons over the last couple, going back to 2021, he had 22 home runs. He's got a little bit more power than he flashed last year, but as long as he's getting on base ahead of these key hitters, if that's where he's hitting in the lineup, looks like a pretty good spot. Anthony Santander, I'm kind of just going to try and get through this game a little bit, by the way, just because I know the DK people are not interested in this one as much. So Anthony Santander, outfield and first base eligible at 3,500, pulling a team leading 6.24 in the home run model. Here's the home run column. All right, all this is visible this year. Projections for FanDuel are over here, not highlighted in the conditional formatting. The prices are, for some reason, projections for DK are over here. Salary and whatnot will be over there. So Santander, another guy, 28 home runs last year. A lot of underappreciated power out of Santander. A 215 ISO, created runs 19% better than average. He had 33 home runs the year before with a 214 ISO, a 120 WRC plus. Just 18 going back if we're going all the way back to 2021. But last couple of years have been really, really solid from Santander for power. Hits from both sides of the plate, so you get some upside there. The first base eligibility is a nice little twist. Not that I'm going to play him over Ryan Mountcastle all that many times if I'm going to the Orioles a bunch of times. I really like Mountcastle in this spot. He's cheap enough. I like the projection. He's coming up with a decent mark in the home run model. He dipped in terms of his home run upside. 18 home runs last year in 470 plate appearances. He missed a couple hundred plate appearances with injury, but the year before he had 22 home runs in 609 plate appearances. And then going back to the year before that, he was at 33 home runs before they made the park changes in 586. There's a little bit of park factor there working against him in his home park. There's a little bit of just happenstance that knocked him down to 18. I think 25 is easily in reach. I think he's got upside to about 30. The premium contact stays good. 12.1% barrel last year, 44.6% hard hit. That is down a little bit from 15% barrel and 45.8% hard hit, but it's not tragic. He improved his strikeout rate. He improved his walk rate slightly. Just needs to be in the lineup every day. I see some upside for Ryan Mountcastle. Gunnar from the left side of the plate, very solid shortstop option at 3,500. Hit 28 home runs, stole 10 bases, scored 100 runs last year. Created runs 23% better than average. Hits the ball very hard for a shortstop, 234 ISO. Had a 51.7% hard hit rate last year. At 3,500, that works out. You can stack these four guys on FanDuel for, it comes out to an average of 3,400 apiece. So it's pricey, total of 13,900, but you can definitely get there. Any of these stacks that we talk about, there's at least a path to be able to combine these guys and, say, the Reds, or these guys and, say, the Dodgers, so on and so forth. As long as you're willing to embrace some risk on the pitcher mound. Down lineup, Jordan Westburg. Everybody in Baltimore basically hates him because he's not Jackson Holliday. He's filling in at second base until Holliday rounds into form at second base. He's a shortstop on this slate. We have 3 shortstop-only players on the Orioles, which is also kind of annoying for stacking. You do have the util spot on FanDuel to use, but it's not ideal. One of those shortstops is Jorge Mateo. If he's in the lineup at 2,100, it's all speed. Speed and defense. There is no real ability to hit the ball. He hits the occasional home run, but over 350 plate appearances last year, we got 7. We got 32 stolen bases after he came out of the gate really, really hot in April. I think 6 of those 7 home runs, or 5 of those 7 home runs, were hit in March, April last year. Just completely died on the vine once the calendar flipped to May. Sed Mullins I talked about already. Ramon Urias, kind of a little bit of an afterthought. 4 home runs and 396 plate appearances last year. Did have 16 the year before that, and I think the year before that he was only at 7. So Urias, just kind of an afterthought, but if you need a little bit of positional flex, he does have 3 positions, first, second, and third for only 2,500. So he can make things work with these other guys. If you're looking to maybe not get completely filthy at pitcher, maybe you go like a Hayes, Rushman, Mountcastle, Westberg kind of a thing, or Urias kind of a stack. And you're obviously forgoing some of the premium talent on the team, but it does make it a little bit more affordable. And we're all just looking for that rising tide effect, right? That's why we're stacking. I put that in the column today. I put a couple bullet points about just general MLB DFS strategy in the strategy article today. Hey, go figure. Basically, point number 1 and the most important, the paramount point, if you're not familiar with MLB DFS, you want to build stacks. You want to have at least 1 full stack, in my opinion, in every lineup that you build. And I'm a 2-stack guy. I like 4 3s. I like, 4 4s are fine by me. So like on FanDuel 4-4, 4-3-1 type constructions. Occasionally I'll dabble with like a 3-3-2 or like 3-3-1-1. DraftKings 5-3, 5-2-1. You can mix things up a little bit more on DraftKings, get a little bit more creative, just because you can get the 5 guys from one team. So with that one big stack, if you go 5 and then 3 one-offs, it's not as messy as it is on FanDuel because you do have the 5-man correlation. But that is what we're looking for because baseball is extremely volatile. It's extremely event-based. These projections will not come close on many, many nights. It's nothing like basketball where, there's at least a reasonable expectation of, all right, this player at these rates for that many minutes, on the average night, he's going to do this. In baseball, if you hit the ball 30% of the time, you've got to track toward the Hall of Fame. That's the important thing to keep in mind. So when those events happen, we want to capture the most possible scoring from any of those events because there's a limited number of events. And when I say events, I'm talking about an RBI double, obviously a home run, so on and so forth. If you just have the home run hitter, you get a big bump in your score. You get your 18 points or whatever. And I think in FanDuel scoring, forgive me. But you get your points for the home run hitter. But if you've got the home run hitter, you've got the guy who walked in the leadoff spot 2 spots before him. You've got the guy who singled after that. You get the points from that walk, from that single. You also get the points from their runs for each of those individuals. You get the points for the RBIs, obviously, from the home run. So it just creates the full block of getting everything out of that big knock, out of that big inning. And then you ride that up the ladder, obviously. So we're looking to get the... Fanatic says, everyone puts FanDuel in their title for clickbait, but only want to attend to people who play DK. Stop lying in your titles and call it what it is. A DK show, not FanDuel. So lame. You talking to me? I'm only talking about FanDuel right now. I play on FanDuel. I primarily talk and think in FanDuel terms. I hope that was like I like this show because it's not like that kind of a statement, Fanatic. So anyway, we always want to be stacking. That's the long and short of that. Let me get through this friggin' game. On the Baltimore side, Corbin Burnes, 10-2. Big price tag. We've got a lot of guys who are really similar pitcher projection-wise. Not to spoil things. Here's the pitcher board. Look at all these guys between like 31 and 29, 28 points. It's a lot of same across the board today. So you can really play the pricing game. Not to spoil it, but there's your path to putting together whatever stacks you want. It's a lot more viable on FanDuel where he's 5,500 and separated by like 2,000 over everybody else. At 6,500, he's just in the mix with Frankie Montas, Josiah Gray on Nestor Cortez, Miles Michaelis on DraftKings. So it's not nearly the advantage on DraftKings. I do think Garrett Crochet is very playable at that price as an SP2 on DraftKings. But I'm eyeballing him as a cheapo SP1 at 5,500 on FanDuel. And you can get to anything that you want if you play Garrett Crochet. We'll talk about him in a bit. It's a tightrope. Don't get me wrong. It is a risky play. There's no guarantee in that one. And this is a high projection for him. But you can see, again, the point there was Corbin Burnes at 10-2. He's got a 30-point projection. He's only 3 off the lead, but that puts him a few spots down the board. We've got, with all number 1 starters, or predominantly number one starters today, we've got a lot to choose from. We've got a few guys at better prices. Cole Ragans, if you like him, at 8,800 against the somewhat high strikeout Twins. Jesus Luzardo at 91 against the Pirates. Framber against the Yankees is cheaper. Logan Webb against the Pods is cheaper. Pablo against the Royals is very affordable at 97, in my opinion. That's a really good-looking spot. Pablo Lopez, quietly, 4th in baseball, 200-plus strikeouts last year. So while I like Corbin Burns and while I think there's plenty of upside for him, I don't know that I want to pay the price that many times. And I think this Angels lineup is sneaky okay. I mean, it's obvious. It's got Mike Trout in it, for one thing. That's never a bad start. Trout hitting third in the projected lineup, 3,700. Obviously, a very strong team-leading projection, a 6.20 to lead the team in the home run model. He had 18 home runs in 362 plate appearances last year, 227 ISO created runs, 34% better than average. Contrary to popular belief, he's still Mike Trout. He just needs to be healthy and on the field. And I think he's still going to be able to do Mike Trout things. He's probably not going to ever steal 25 bases again. But 40 home runs in a full season is definitely on the board. So any lineup that begin and one of the reasons I say that, look at the barrel rates, look at the contact over the last couple of years. 16% barrel rate, 51.5% hard hits last year, 19.7% barrel, 50.3% hard hits. These are, there are 4 guys maybe in baseball that do this. Maybe 5, 6, somewhere around there, but it's not many. That's what keeps me with high faith in Mike Trout. Also draws walks 12.4% of the time, so at least keeps himself relevant, keeps himself on base, 367 on base last year. But they've got some okay, interesting parts. I really like Brandon Drury as a affordable $2,700 option at first base, second base. Like him better in season long, where you can flex him around. But Drury's turned himself into a capable power hitter, hit 26 home runs last year, had 28 the year before, and that was right after, in the end of 2021, making a specific change, saying, I want to hit for more power, and then he just turned around and started doing it. So it's very real for Brandon Drury, and the price is very cheap at $2,700 on FanDuel. At the top of the lineup, Anthony Rendon is on the record saying he doesn't like playing baseball. I think he should just retire instead of faking injury. He made 183 plate appearances last year, 193 the year before that, and 249 the year before that. He has 13 total home runs in the last 3 years. It's really disappointing from a guy who used to be a premium third baseman, if not a star. You never know. He did still have a 41.6% hard hit rate last year. He only struck out 14.8% of the time, 13.7% walks. There are good numbers in here in his 183 plate appearances. He just didn't really do anything with that ability. He did get on base at a 361 clip. So at least there's a correlation piece for only 2,700. Maybe you can get there. Aaron Hicks, discarded by the Yankees, picked up by Baltimore, had an okay resurgence in the second half for a little while, and then they didn't really need him that much anymore. Ended the year with 8 home runs, 6 stolen bases, 253, 353, 383 over 312 plate appearances. Did end up creating runs 9% better than average. And what's never changed about Aaron Hicks is this ability to get on base. 353 on base, sees a lot of pitches. He's a discerning hitter. He knows how to draw a walk. He's just never healthy. When he is healthy, he's got a little bit of power, but I don't totally buy into like an actual upside toward 20-ish even home runs. Give him 600 plate appearances and maybe he can get to 20. But I think that's around your ceiling, and it's probably more realistically like 16, 18. And the reason I say that is kind of the opposite of what I said about Trout. Look at his numbers over the last 2 years in terms of premium contact. Just 4% barrels, 29.4% hard hits last year, 5.8% and 33.1% the year before. Those are smallish samples, but the year before was 499 plate appearances. 453 plate appearances, and he only came up with 8 home runs in that one. But it is a capable veteran bat that can get on base. Both of these guys, if nothing else, can get on base ahead of that guy. And they're very cheap. So you can get that 3-man as just an oddball little 3-man that does include Mike Trout for $2,900 on the average, $8,700 total. That's cheap for a stack that includes Mike Trout. They're going up against Corbin Burns. It's not a great ballpark for power. A lot of that sucks. I'm not advocating it necessarily, but that's why you would maybe consider it. Taylor Ward, 14 home runs last season. Hit 23 the year before that in 564 plate appearances. Missed some time last year, only 409 plate appearances. Has pretty reasonable upside from the right side of the plate for a fair price at $3,000. Nolan Shanuel, 2,900 at first base. 132 plate appearances last year. Did pretty well. 275, 402, 330. 12% better than average creating runs. Not a bad option for a cheap price if you're stacking Angels, but we're getting awfully thin on going to the Angel stack. Miguel Sano not on the slate as of the last time I checked, but in the projected lineup. Did hit 4 spring home runs. First time we've seen him in kind of a while. Was once a fearsome power hitter, or at least had the reputation of one. A lot of strikeouts, but I'm glad he's back in the league. Logan O'Hoppe, 199 plate appearances last season. Hit 14 home runs. Had a really hot start, missed a lot of time, missed most of the season with an injury, came back, hit a couple late in the season. 264 ISO, created runs 13% better than average. Pretty solid catcher. We'll see what it holds up as if he makes 450 plate appearances this year, but a reasonable upside for power. He had a 15.6% barrel, 46.7% hard hit rate in that sample last year. So Logan O'Hoppe is a reasonable catcher for only 2,800 as well. Zach Neto, one of the first call-ups from his draft class, rocketed through the minors last year, made 329 plate appearances in the show, 9 homers, 5 steals, 11% worse than average for run creation. Not the greatest option hitting ninth against Corbin Burns in a stack that we don't really love today. There are some cheap values. It is kind of interesting given how cheap everybody around Mike Trout is. It's the only reason I'd really consider it. Corbin Burns is not overly targetable. He had a 3.39 ERA last year, a 107 whip, a 3.81 xFIP. That does, that's a half of a run more than his ERA was. His strikeout rate did come down significantly, 30.5% in 2022, 35.6% in 2021, dipped down to 25.5. So we've lost 10% of strikeout rate with Corbin Burns over the last couple of years. We've gained 3% of walk rate, but he's still relatively elite. 12.2% swinging, 29.2% CSW last season. Doesn't give up all that much power, doesn't give up really any hard hits or any exit velo. 86.4 mile an hour average exit velo, 32.2% hard hits allowed. Still very much Corbin Burns in the sense of I don't think I necessarily want to throw Anthony Rendon and Aaron Hicks at him. Shannon Lambert, yes. Corbin Burns is on the O's now. They are gearing up for their move. Probably a year. We're probably still a year ahead of time. Next year, when all the kids have gotten a little bit more experience, when Jackson Holliday's gotten some experience. But yeah, they're close and they're gearing up. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, hit that like button. Bunch of people here hanging out with us. Appreciate everybody. First game that is on the DraftKings slate. Welcome to the show, DraftKings fans. So your projections and your salaries and whatnot, your positioning are all over here. This is the DraftKings side of the board. These are stats. These are all StatCast last 2 seasons, strikeout rates and walk rates last 2 seasons. These are my custom numbers. This is the home run column. That's just a custom power number that it's linear power that I created that feeds part of the home run mark. This is your FanDuel stuff, and then these are historical stats going the last 3 years going that way. And then the pitchers are all the way over there. And then this is information that I never show, but that's just the schedule and stuff. And I think that's outdated. I don't think I updated that table because I never actually show it. All right, game 2. Half hour into the show, a lot of talking for one game. Got to find our footing, It took me a little while to write up the first few teams in the article, too. All right, how did I used to do this? Where is that? What is this? Had to get my fingers going. Felt good, though. Knocking out like 12,000 words overnight. Stephen Leibowitz says, makes me like the O's even more than I did for this season. Yeah, they're going to be a very good team for quite a while. Oh, Dustin, we talked about other stuff in there. The game was just up on the screen. But if you're new to the show, Dustin, this is kind of how we do. That's why we started at 11. Not necessarily alive before lock, but not alive before lock. So, Pirates, Marlins. Let's see if we got any lineups in. The Twins and the Royals lineups dropped. I'll grab those real quick. Pirates and the Marlins. We've got Jesus Luzardo going for the Marlins. and Mitch Keller going for the Pirates. Keller had his long-awaited breakout last year, finally. I don't think I had him on a single season-long team because I was zero starter last year, this year, last couple of years. But for a while, I was chasing Mitch Keller along with most of the rest of the industry. Finally came up 194 and a third last year, 32 starts, 25.5% strikeout rate, posted a 4.21 ERA, and even nicer than that, a 3.70 xFIP underneath it. Just a 9.7% swinging strike rate, 28.3% CSW. I'm a little bit concerned that that creeps up on him. Cuts into the strikeout rate, or at least cuts into like the ceiling of it, getting beyond this strikeout rate. He did give up a little bit of premium contact. 8.6% barrels is starting to push the high side. 87.7 miles an hour of exit velo is fine. 35.6% hard hit rate is fine. 3% home run rate, also pretty okay. Mostly harnessed his issues with command and control. Cut from an 8.7% walk rate down to 6.7 in a nice step forward. I like Mitch Keller in general. I think it's a reasonably good spot for him going up against the Marlins here. Projects out fairly well. The only thing I don't really like is that he's 9,300 on this slate. If I'm spending that, I don't know that he's my guy. He's down here, but again, all these guys are essentially within 4 points of one another, so it's minimal. But if I'm spending 93 on Mitch Keller, I might consider Jesus Luzardo on the other side of that game for one at 91. I'll certainly consider Cole Ragans at 88. On the DraftKings slate, Keller's 8,300, so it's a little bit of a different story. But you do have Luzardo on the other side with equally strong talent at 7,600. Also in a very good matchup going up against a middling Pirates team. So I think either one of these pitchers are in play. They're just different site to site. Luzardo's a little bit expensive as well on at 91 on FanDuel, but again, they just both project out very close to one another. He's 200 cheaper than Keller is. Pitching at home for whatever that's worth. He did post a higher strikeout rate last year than Keller did by a couple points. 28.1% strikeout rate, 3.63 ERA, 1.22 whip, and a 3.72 xFIP. The xFIP and the ERA really close together, basically is who he is on the surface. And who he is on the surface, pretty good. He's also got a fairly high barrel rate allowed, a little bit of an advanced launch angle, a little bit of advanced hard hit, getting up to 89.3. 90 is usually the limiter for it's starting to get a little dicey on your exit velo there. But 89.3, we're under that threshold. Kept it under 3% home runs. Home runs are very wonky, by the way. It's a weird, back and forth. So you will see random fluctuation in some guys' home run rates. But I do like to measure it. I do like to track it because I think it's important, especially for DFS purposes. And then the thing that I like about Luzardo over Mitch Keller here is the difference in the swinging strike rate. 14.1% swinging strike rate compared to Mitch's 9.7%. That's a big difference. 29.9% CSW percentage. Those are appreciable differences that make me like Luzardo a little bit better here. Pirates are going to stack up a fairly right-handed lineup against him. Brian Reynolds hits from both sides, but you got McCutchen, Brian Hayes, Connor Joe, Eduardo Olivares, Henry Davis in that lineup. Michael A. is not on the FanDuel slate. He is on the DraftKings slate. He's right-handed as well. A little bit of underappreciated power in Michael A. that we talked about all season long last year. O'Neal Cruz hiding down in the bottom of the lineup. I wouldn't be surprised to see O'Neal Cruz more in this territory. We'll see what they release in the confirmed lineup. I just ran with Labs projected lineups for today. I just didn't have time to sit there and go through every single depth chart and figure out the optimal lineup only to have it change. So I just went with what everybody's using. But I wouldn't be shocked to see O'Neal Cruz hitting higher. The Pirates are okay. They're very, very cheap on both sites. They're easy enough to get to. There's this stretch of guys that's really cheap on DK. You do have a big price tag on Brian Reynolds. He's 5,200 on the DraftKings slate. He's 35 on FanDuel, so he's expensive on the FanDuel slate too. But I feel like him and several other guys on this slate, DraftKings really went overboard with pricing them up. So it's a little bit dicier, even as a value proposition on the DraftKings slate. 4,400 apiece for Brian Hayes and Andrew McCutchen feels a little high when they're 25 and 29 on the FanDuel side. So I don't think I like the Pirates as a value option a little bit better on FanDuel, but I don't think they're overly important. I don't think they're a high priority option. Middling home run marks, not bad home run marks, but we're looking for 10s. 8 for Brian Reynolds is our high point there. He hit 24 last year, stole 12 bases. 110 WRC plus with a 197 ISO. It was a little bit of a downturn overall for him. He had 27 home runs the year before, 199 ISO, and 24 home runs with a 220 ISO the year before that. So there was a little tiny downturn. He pulled himself together for the most part and finished strong. But it wasn't the greatest season. What I do like is that he maintained a very good contact profile, actually improved year over year in the contact profile. Just didn't translate to actual game power for whatever reason. Could be some happenstance in there. A couple fly balls that died a little early instead of getting out of the ballpark. These things happen. Like I said, home runs a little bit wonky. Player that I really like, Brian Hayes. He's no secret. He's on a lot of, sleeper late round pick type lists for this year. We talked about him a lot through last year. He was having a strong season. He had what I really liked a lot that we touched on was the 48.4% hard hit rate, the 46.8 that he had put up the year before that, the sub 20 strikeout rate, around 20 the year before. So he was showing good signs with his bat on ball skills. He has moderate power, 15 home runs last year, 10 stolen bases. Year before he stole 20, only hit 7 home runs that year. So the power emerged a little bit last year. The triple slash improved somewhat, at least on the front end, 271, 309, 453 versus 244, 314, 345. His WRC plus got above average at 101. I like Brian Hayes' chances to go for 2020 this year. If he stays healthy, it's at least in reach. We've seen him get to that level in each category. So kind of like the upside for Brian Hayes. He's very, very cheap at $2,900. So he definitely fits the value narrative. 44 is a more appropriate, fair price for him, I think. And then this mix of guys, Connor Joe is a righty who hits lefties better than he hits righties, but he's not overly high end. 11 home runs last year, 247, 339, 421. Did finish with a 107 WRC plus over 472. He's a better correlation play than anything else. I don't know that I'm going that direction at 2,300 first base outfield, 3,000 first base outfield. Edward Olivares, 385 plate appearances, 12 homers, 11 steals, 105 WRC plus. Kind of the same thing. So is there a low strikeout righty that can make decent contact, but I don't think I'm diving into the depths of the Pirates lineup. I do like Henry Davis. I like that he's maintained his catcher eligibility on the FanDuel slate for 2,800. You don't necessarily need him at catcher over there. I wish he had it on DraftKings. He'll probably get it back at some point this season. 41.4% hard hit rate over his 255 plate appearances last year, 7 home runs. Just a 76 WRC plus, but a very high-end young kid that they've got a lot of high hopes for, should develop into a better hitter as the season goes on. Just kind of an interesting value piece if you happen to be going to Pirates today. Michael A., like I said, was hiding at the bottom of the Twins lineup for most of last year. We kept going there in oddball spots. 388 plate appearances. He paid it off with 21 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 223 ISO. Just a 95 WRC plus. He's not the strongest run creation correlated scoring play in the world. That's what happens when you hit home runs from the bottom of a lineup. But he's reasonable. You get him at 2,500 on the DraftKings slate. Again, not on the FanDuel slate, at least so far. Jared Triolo, total afterthought at the bottom of the lineup. Did go 298, 388, 398 with a 118 WRC plus over 209 last year. Not a lot of premium contact. Did strike out 30% of the time in that stretch. I would need to see significantly more before I'm endorsing Jared Triolo. O'Neal Cruz missed basically all of last season, made 40 plate appearances. The year before, he made 361 plate appearances as a high-end rookie, hit 17 homers, 11 stolen bases, a 218 ISO, created run 6% better than average, but he's got a strikeout issue. He and Ellie are similar kind of players in that they strike out an absolute ton without walking. Actually, it wasn't that bad last year. I'm sorry, that's last year with 40 plate appearances. That doesn't count. 34.9%. That was the number I was looking for. 34.9% in that larger sample 2 years ago. So there is a strikeout issue. There's a lack of polish, let's say. Needs a little bit of time to, really get a grip on the major league level. But just immense skill set. So we could see absolute big things from O'Neal Cruz. Could start today and he could never look back. That said, lefty from the bottom of the lineup, from the bottom of the Pirates lineup, not the ideal spot. Dimitri's here. What's going on, D? Morning, gang. I didn't know Terry was going early. That's why I got to hit that subscribe, buddy. Fortunately, you've only missed one game so far. Marlins side of this one. I don't think I'm going in this direction. They're easy to afford. You do have Jazz Chisholm at 51 on the DraftKings slate, but only 33 on FanDuel. He's a little bit differentiated site to site. Like him a lot better, obviously, on FanDuel. He's a lot easier to get to. Best player on the team. Missed a large chunk of last year, 384 plate appearances total. Still came up with 19 homers, 22 stolen bases, a 210 ISO, a 104 WRC plus. Year before, 14 and 12 in only 241 opportunities. Year before that, 18 and 23 in 507. Counting stats are there, if nothing else, whenever Jazz is on the field. Full-time outfielder now. Price is right for sure on the FanDuel slate. I do think you can find success with these Marlins against Mitch Keller on the right day. It's just there's a lot of options on this slate. There's a lot of teams I'd rather get to. And they've lost their major source of power in Jorge Soler. He's a giant now. So now we're dealing with Luis Arias, who's a fantastic table setter with a 354 average, 393 on base. He was chasing 400 for the first half of last year. But he doesn't have any kind of power. He's a correlated scoring option. He'll get to first base for you. He'll get you 3 points, 6 points in a hurry. But he's not going to stack points on points on points. He needs those big home run hitters. He's got Jake Berger back there. Berger hit 34 home runs across the White Sox in part of the end of the season with the Marlins last year. They've got Josh Bell, who hit 22 homers last year. So they've got a little bit of pop. But neither of those guys is Jorge Soler. I'm not totally sure we see Berger get back to this level. He's kind of in a show-me spot, in my opinion. 27.6% strikeout, just a 5.9% walk rate. He did improve in the strikeout category from 30.6 the year before, but if he slips back to the 30s without improving walks, it becomes a lot uglier all of a sudden. He's, a 220 hitter, under a 300 on base. He loses a significant chunk of his WRC plus from if that happens. Did put bat on ball extremely well last year. 16.7% barrel rate, 49.3% hard hits, and was similar the year before. So there's a little bit of underlying negative. There's a little bit of underlying positive with Jake Berger. If you're stacking Marlins, I definitely think he's in play and one of the priorities in that lineup. I'd probably look at Arias, one of these two guys, definitely Jazz, and then one of these three guys probably. It's an okay lineup when you look at it that way because Brian De La Cruz not bad. Avi Garcia not bad. Christian Bethancourt is Christian Bethancourt, but these are good to decent players. Some of them veterans, some of them still younger guys. But like picking up a Timmy Anderson and inserting him into that lineup is kind of interesting. He was a tragedy last year. Timmy hit 1 home run in 524 plate appearances last year. He ended up slashing 245, 286, 296, a .051 ISO, a 60 WRC plus. Tim Anderson fell to 40% worse than average creating runs last year. Just an awful lost season for Timmy. But he's not ancient by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's 30, 31. Very, very cheap. He's a guy that does have home run upside, home run and stolen base production. He only hit 6 home runs the year before in 351 plate appearances. That season was cut down by injury. 17 and 18 in 551 back in 2021. Reasonable expectation of upside for counting stats from home runs and steals, which lead to runs, and definitely which lead to runs when he's hitting like he did then, 309, 338, 469. That's a different hitter. Last year, 2022 rather, 301, 339, 395. He just completely cratered last year. But some signs of life in the spring, some hope that he's got a reasonable path to a turnaround. The White Sox obviously cut him loose. Took him most of the offseason to catch on with the Marlins. It was basically musical chairs, and that was the last job that became available. So he's going to be the starting shortstop for now. We'll see how it goes. But at 2,500, I like him a little bit on FanDuel, especially if you're going to Marlins. 3,900 on DraftKings, he definitely makes the stack work a little bit. I wouldn't be plugging him in instead of Jazz Chisholm, but maybe instead of Luis Arias off the top, you take a solid $600 discount and just go 2 through 5. That's an approach. Jesus Sanchez, young kid with a lot of skill. 14 home runs in just 402 plate appearances, a 197 ISO, 109 WRC plus last year. Puts bat on ball well. 12.2% barrel rate, 46.3% hard hits in that medium-sized sample last year. Needs consistency, needs to stay on the field, but very cheap. 3,100, 2,600 across sites in the outfield. Lefty back going up against Keller with a fair upside for power. He's not exactly crashing through the top of the home run model at 4.13, But I do think there's reasonable upside there, and definitely somebody to keep in mind as the season goes along, especially before he gets expensive if he starts hitting. Brian De La Cruz quietly hit 19 home runs, stole 4 bases in 627 plate appearances last year. He was all right, 92 WRC plus, a below average 153 ISO though. 42.1% hard hits is fine, but just 8.8% barrels, down from 11.9 the year before. Medium in terms of strikeouts. He's affordable. It's just a spot that, you only consider if you're stacking a bunch of Marlins, though, once you get down to the 7-hitter here. Same for the 8-hitter, Avi Garcia. He's just very, very cheap. Only 118 plate appearances last year. Only 8 home runs in 380 the year before. We got to go back to 2021. He hit 29 home runs in 515 plate appearances. That's the last time he was relevant. No guarantees that Avi's going to be relevant this year, but if he's in the lineup, he is cheap. Bethancourt is just a mixer at catcher. He did have 11 sneaky home runs at the end of the lineup last year, 332 plate appearances. Neither team overly prioritized. These teams, on the other hand, now we're talking. Yeah, Dimitri, probably got to take a look at the notifications so that you get pop-ups or whatever it is, but I would suspect that it's that. Travis Wyndham's here. What's going on, Trav? Tizzleman, we've got the Reds, Royals, Astros, and Twins confirmed lineups. Yep, got the Reds in here. I said I was going to do it before, and I didn't end up doing it. Let me grab the Twins and the Royals now. This is where the confirmed lineups go. Anybody who was here last year or previous years has seen how that works, but I've got my projected lineups. These stay static or get changed as lineups change, but those are against both hands. That's what feeds the projected ones. So if you're looking at this screen, red P means still the projected lineup. Green C, that's our confirmed lineup. Right? Pretty straightforward. So the Reds are confirmed. The Nats are not so far. I do not want to roster either one of these pitchers, so we can kind of accelerate a little bit in the analysis here. Frankie Montas, no thank you. Didn't really pitch much last year. No real esteem for him. He's had okay runs. He's an okay pitcher. Mid-20s strikeout rate the last couple of seasons. 23-4 last year, 26-6 the year before that, before the Yankees got him. But just came to New York, fell apart. I didn't like him when they acquired him. I didn't like him after he fell apart, and I don't like him today, pitching in Cincinnati with his new club. $7,500, fair price. At 63 on DK, if you're shopping around for a very cheap SP2, he is cheaper than like Garrett Crochet. So there's a little bit of upside there, but he's still got to get through a improving to somewhat sneaky, maybe okay Nationals lineup. In this ballpark, I really don't love it. Josiah Gray, I want no part of in this situation. Even at 6,000 on the DraftKings slate, I find it difficult to believe that Josiah Gray is going to succeed in this spot. Like I said at the top of the show, he's got a guy that we've been targeting for several seasons, and you can see it right here why. In 2022, he gave up a 5.86% home run rate, one of the highest marks we're going to see all season. 6.19 the year before that on a 12.2% barrel rate. Last year, 2022's barrel rate was 10.7%. Those numbers improved. Cut barrels to 9.4 last year. Hard hits right about the same. So the hard hits haven't changed. The barrels came down a little bit, but there's arguable happenstance involved in that statistic on the pitching side. Home run rate, like I said, home runs are a little bit wonky, but this isn't a noteworthy improvement. It came down to 3.15. With hard hits and average exit velocity staying about the same. So that's attributable to the cut and barrel. That's attributable to the cut and launch angle, which is part of barrel. 16.8 degree average launch, down from 19.7 last year in 2022, and 22.1 degrees on average in 2021. So he made some noteworthy improvements, but along with that, his strikeout rate slipped from 24.8% 2 years ago to 23.7% last year, down to 20.5% last year, while his walk rate went from an already bad 10.7 to 10.2 all the way up to 11.5 last year. He had a 3.91 ERA that might deceive some people. His xFIP was 5.12. This is the truth of who he is. You can use xFIP, xERA, Sierra. They're all good stats. ERA is not a good stat. ERA is very, very deceptive about the nature of a pitcher. So you always want to be looking at the underlying values. An 11% swinging strike rate is decent, but a 25.9% CSW is awful. There's a lot of bad in with that minor improvement in the power department. A lot of that's still in the model here, and a lot of it is coming through for the Cincinnati Reds. You can see some very aggressive power marks for a lot of these guys. Christian Encarnacion Strand, the 3-hitter. I picked him for the home run pick of the day when I thought he was going to be the either 6 or 7 hitter. And I like him even more now. His home run mark only goes up by jumping up the lineup to 3rd. Really, really high on Christian Encarnacion Strand this year. Big breakout coming for power. 10.5% barrels, 48.4% hard hits in his debut 241 plate appearances last season. He hit 13 home runs in the show. He also had, it's in the article, but he had a whole bunch of, full article with like all of this content, like 12,000 words up on the site, by the way, if you haven't been here, if you weren't here at the top of the show. Also, full hitter projections, pitcher projections, top stack rankings, home run picks, etc., etc. It's all on the website at rotoscouts. Encarnacion Strand had, before his call-up last season, 316 plate appearances in AAA and hit 20 home runs over that stretch. So 33 combined home runs across the 2 levels last year. Very, very good power upside. Also hit 270, 328, 477 in that sample in the show. Created runs 12% better than average. He struck out 28.6% of the time. That's high. 5.8% walk rate is not all that good. When you combine it with Ellie's 33.7% strikeout rate, having them close together in the lineup gets problematic. Ellie dropped from the projected lineup. He was up here in the early projected version. Jonathan India off the top of the red stack. Like him a lot. 2,800 on FanDuel, 3,900 on the DraftKings slate. Big price difference. He's going to be popular today. Everybody in the Reds lineup is. They're a very popular stack, but this looks like a key go-to spot for bats. I like India off the top. 17 homers, 14 steals last year in 529 plate appearances. Did finish below average for weighted run creation each of the last 2 years. Going back 3 years ago, he was at a 122 in 2021. Had 21 homers, 12 steals that year. Probably his best season. But there's reasonable upside for counting stats. If he's getting on base ahead of the guys, the key guys behind him, so much the better. He's a reasonable play at second base on either side. Will Benson is way too cheap, especially now that he's hitting second. He was projected originally down in this territory. Getting Benson in that 2 spot for that price is killer. 329 plate appearances last season, 275, 365, 498, hit 11 home runs, stole 19 bases, mostly from the bottom of the lineup, somewhat anonymously. Very good left-handed hitter, upside for 2020 and potentially beyond 25, somewhere around that for the season. 223 ISO, 128 WRC plus last year in the small sample. Love the spot. 10.3% barrel, 41.1% hard hit, going up against a nothing right-handed pitcher. That is a very, very good spot for a very affordable Will Benson. Encarnacion Strand, by the way, has 1st and 3rd eligibility on the DraftKings slate, which helps because you can play him alongside Heimer Candelario, who has the same eligibility. He's 4,200. I prefer Encarnacion Strand for 4,000 between the two, but Candelario is a pretty solid hitter on his own. 220 ISO last year, hit 22 home runs, finished the season 17% above average creating runs. So Heimer Candelario definitely can find a place in red stacks for me. 2,900 on FanDuel is way too cheap. He's going to be popular alongside these guys. Jake Fraley was the individual home run pick from the Reds. Christian Encarnacion Strand was the one for the entire day. In the team by team ones, Jake Fraley got it. 10.26 in the home run model. He hit 15 last year in 380 plate appearances. Had middling numbers in terms of premium contact. He's got a lot of buzz going around, some power upside. He's got a lot of power coming through the model today. Lefty bat going up against Josiah Gray. I like the upside for a little bit of premium contact. Like the upside for a little bit of maybe stolen base alongside a potential home run. Multiple ways that Jake Fraley can contribute today. 256, 339, 443 last year to finish off his triple slash. Not bad numbers across just 380 plate appearances. Ellie was all over the place. Kid came up as an absolute superstar. Right? He was anointed as the next big thing. Total star, day one. And he delivered in a lot of ways. He ended up making 427 plate appearances. He stole 35 bases. It's pretty good. He's got, if not the fastest pure circling the bases speed, then, top 3 fastest. He hit 13 home runs. But unfortunately, he struck out 33.7% of the time. He only walked 8.2%. That's an okay walk rate, but it's not enough to keep him afloat against that heavy strikeout rate when he's also going 235, not really getting on base in other ways. 235, 300 is not the front end that you want to see in Elly De La Cruz's triple slash, especially not when he costs 5,600 on the DraftKings slate. That is a bonkers price. 175 ISO last year, finished the year 16% below average for run creation. Elly has a lot of work to do to get up to being a true major league star. He has ungodly talent, though. Everything I said about Oneil Cruz is true for Elly, and Elly has probably more raw talent than Oneil Cruz. 45.9% hard hit rate is excellent. 8.5% barrel rate for a rookie over his first 427 plate appearances. Not bad. It's just how high-priced Elly is on the DraftKings slate. It makes it very difficult to get him. At least his teammates around him are very cheap. You've got a couple cheapo pitchers that you can work in as an SP2. So you can definitely get to these $5,000 guys. It's just, I think he's expensive and doesn't really warrant that price. I think he should be at best 5,000 and probably more like 47, 48 until he shows us a little different. On FanDuel at 34, multi-position eligible, third base and shortstop, sign me up. I don't mind that spot at all. Either way, solid 9.87 in the home run model. Upside for power, upside for speed. There are counting stats available for sure with Elly. Spencer Steer had a strong season last year. 271, 356, 464. Created runs 18% better than average. Ended up hitting 23 home runs. Stole 15 bases. Kind of a quietly underrated, really strong season out of Spencer Steer. No premium contact really from him. Kind of like with Jake Fraley. Get their numbers without making tremendous contact at the plate. But if he can continue it, I don't dislike the trends that we've seen from him. So that's a ton of plate appearances last year. 108 plate appearances the year before that wasn't really all that good. But that's a very small sample. He's cheap, 3,200, outfield and first base eligible. On DraftKings at 47, he falls into that trap of that's a little pricey. He should be in this territory. 42, 4,000, a little more around there, especially with the drop in the lineup. If he was hitting second, maybe you could get him a little bit more expensive. But this feels high on the DraftKings slate. The Reds are much more accessible price-wise on FanDuel. Nick Martini hit 6 home runs in just 79 plate appearances last year, so there's that. And then Tyler Stevenson, 13 home runs as a catcher, 517 plate appearances. He's a cheap catcher that you can mix in. He's not a bad hitter by any means. 243, 317, 378. That's fine. 15% below average and not reliable power, but capable of going deep from time to time. Did strike out 26.1% of the time. Puts a lot of zeros into lineups, but has reasonable catcher power. On the Nats side, I do think the Nats are a viable stack here as well. I don't really like Frankie Montas. I think you can attack him in this ballpark. Even in his good seasons, we're still talking about a guy, 4.05 ERA, 3.61 xFIP. Those are fine. They're not dominant numbers. They're not ace numbers. 23.4% strikeout rate. The contact numbers are reasonably good. 7.9% barrels, 87.6 miles an hour of exit velo, sub 3% home run rates. Did give up 42% hard hits there, 8.7% barrels. He's gettable for power. This national team, I don't love it, but there's interesting parts. CJ Abrams, an interesting leadoff lefty, presuming that he's in that spot. 18 home runs, 47 stolen bases last year. Even with that, he still ended up 10% below average for run creation somehow. But he's a potentially elite shortstop with a lot of room to grow this year. 4,600 is affordable on the DraftKings slate. 3,200 is downright cheap for him on the FanDuel side. Start a stack with CJ Abrams. Plug Lane Thomas into it maybe. Thomas hit 28 home runs, stole 20 bases last year, scored 101 runs. Respectable triple slash. 201 ISO, created runs 9% better than average. He's only 32 in the outfield on FanDuel, 43 in the outfield on DraftKings. Easily affordable. Left-handed hitting Jesse Winker. 2,800 on DraftKings, 2,300 on FanDuel. Anybody who played him last year in any of his 197 plate appearances isn't going to want to roster him. They're going to think I'm crazy. Anybody who played him the year before in any of his 547 plate appearances, probably not going to want to roster him. Probably going to think I'm crazy. Only hit 14 home runs that year, 219. Did have a 344 on base, 108 WRC plus. Those are reasonable. But all of that is still chasing the 24 home runs, the 305, 394, 556 season that he had with a 148 WRC plus and a 251 ISO back in 2021. The slight good news, maybe, if you want to cast around for things to say about Jesse Winker, is those numbers came in Cincinnati when he was a Red. So he knows this ballpark. It's old home base for him. Did a lot of producing there. More to the point, he does still have pop. He's got a reasonable ability to get himself on base, if nothing else. 2,800 on the DraftKings slate, 2,300 on the FanDuel slate. If he ends up hitting third where he's projected here, you got to like that, at least price-wise. There's upside for power. There's upside for contributions in other ways. And it's a really good lineup spot that correlates well with C.J. Abrams, Lane Thomas. Down from him, you get Joey Meneses, who hit 13 home runs in 657 plate appearances. Had an okay triple slash, but the power took a decent dip last year. Just a 5.4% barrel rate, down from 9.9 the year before. 41.7% hard hit rate, down from 47.1%. But reasonable expectation that Joey Meneses in a new season could get himself back up to more productive levels like this. Maybe come up with, his 240 plate appearances, but maybe come up with something like the 13 home runs that he hit in that 240 plate appearances. That was a really good little breakout there. The guy that I expect you all know that I want to talk about in the middle of this lineup is Joey Gallo. One of my favorites. And I am not saying that sarcastically. He probably got the longest overall write-up in the article today. I love Joey Gallo, unapologetically. The reasons I love Joey Gallo are thus. Last season, in 332 plate appearances over which he did only go 177, 301, 440, he still had a 18.6% barrel rate and a 52.9% hard hit rate. The year before that, he was at 17.6 and 50.5. He does this. Aaron Judge does this at higher numbers. Mike Trout does this. Giancarlo Stanton in the right season does this. Not many other guys. Jordan Alvarez, maybe. Couple other guys. Not many guys hit the ball as hard as Joey Gallo. The other reason I like Joey Gallo, and I think he's wildly underrated. Yes, he struck out 42.8% of the time. That's abominable. That's an awful, terrible, unsustainable strikeout rate last year. 39.8 the year before that. He is the definition. If you looked up 3 true outcomes hitter on Google, a picture of Joey Gallo should just pop up. 14.5% walk rate is outstanding. 13.7% the year before. Unfortunately, with all the swing and miss and then with a little bad BABIP luck, ended up well under the Mendoza line in terms of batting average, and it cut into his on-base percentage. Typically, he's been able to provide a better on-base percentage, which floats his WRC plus a little bit, keeps him more valuable. He only made 332 plate appearances last year with Minnesota. He still hit 21 home runs. I don't know if a lot of people remember that. Joey Gallo was actually pretty decent last year. You just got to ignore batting average, which is an irrelevant stat. He had a 262 ISO. That's a killer mark for power. The contact numbers are ridiculous. And he finished with a 104 WRC plus. He was 4% better than average creating runs, even with being 23 points below the Mendoza line for batting average. On this team, playing first base every day this year, until he loses his job because he's hitting 130, Joey Gallo's got immense upside on any given slate. He's got a 7.26 in the home run model to lead the team today. Think he was the home run pick from the Nationals. Tons and tons of upside for Joey Gallo going up against Frankie Montas here in this ballpark. Can't convince me otherwise. I'll die on that hill. I think I've died multiple times on the Joey Gallo hill already. Kim Ruiz, I like quite a bit. Sneaky catcher pop. 18 home runs last year, went 260, 308, 409. Ended up 7% below average for run creation. I like him to finish above average for run creation this year. I love that he only strikes out 10.3% of the time, 11.5% the year before in a smaller sample. Just great bat on ball skills, even if he's not making premium contact. just not striking out, putting the ball in play has its value for a catcher. He's affordably priced too, $2,400. By the way, Joey Gallo only $2,500 on FanDuel, $3,500 on DraftKings. Keibert Ruiz $3,700 where you need catchers on DK. Not a bad option. You could one-off him, but I don't love it. I would rather, if I'm one-offing a catcher, I'd rather go cheap and I'd rather go somebody higher up in the lineup. Eddie Rosario joined this team fairly late in spring training. He hit 21 home runs with the Braves last year, 195 ISO, finished dead on a 100 WRC plus, league average WRC plus. He's had a bunch of good power seasons over the course of his career. The premium contact marks are not great. The walk rate's not great. Middling strikeout rate. He's all right. 2,500. Wouldn't surprise me to see Eddie Rosario go over 20 home runs again if he hits, 500 plus plate appearances this year, but nobody's idea of a priority. Nick Senzel, whatever, like the 3 degrees down from being a post type sleeper, like your post type, your prospect, your post type, your post type. Just keep on adding posts to that. That's about where we're at with Nick Senzel at this point. 2,500 outfield third base on FanDuel, 3,200 third base outfield on DraftKings. There's still a little bit of talent there. 13 home runs in 330 last year, 6 stolen bases. He wasn't good, not by a long shot. He wasn't inept. On the right day, you squeeze a little bit out of it. I'd rather just, a day where he happens to be hitting like second or something. The best thing that happened to me while I was putting this sheet together for this slate, Luis Garcia Jr. He's no longer Luis Garcia in whatever the feed is. So we don't have to go every single time he's on a slate and cross out the pitchers Luis Garcias across the league. Now we just need to change Will Smith, the pitcher, into Bill Smith, and I will be all set. But that was a nice name change to find. That said, Luis Garcia just kind of a tack on 9 home runs, 9 steals. Nothing special for DFS purposes. Fire up the Reds bats. Reds are an enthusiastic stack. I love Christian Encarnacion Strand for a home run today. Like Jake Fraley for a home run. Love the Red stack, but I think the national stack is potentially underrated. I love Joey Gallo in it. There's your Cliff Notes, Jim Thomas. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Michael Knack says, is Eric Lindquist the Caleb Williams of the DFS world? Oh, I see what you're going for because the pink phone thing. Is that what you're after? Maybe. Either that or I made a connection to what you were saying. I always enjoyed my time with Eric. I think he's a good dude. Delightful human being. Always a smile on his face. Except for when something blows up on him in DFS, and then that typically put a smile on our faces back in the day because it was usually hilarious. But no, I have nothing but love for Eric Lindquist. Good dude. That said, if you mean because he doesn't want to get drafted by the Bears, maybe that's the case. What's going on? Tizzlemane's got the red. Oh, that was the lineup alert. At Gundacker, we back. Yeah, I got to talk to Gun, get him. We got to get together on a show, but we'll definitely make that happen. No doubt about it. All right, both confirmed lineups in this game, so that's fun. We'll get the projections updated for any of these changes after the show. Plenty of time before the 3 o'clock lock to get that done. All right, so decent pitching. I referred to it at the top of the show. You can see these guys project almost identically. Pablo Lopez coming in at 9,700 on FanDuel, 9,300 on DraftKings. Cole Ragans quite a bit cheaper, 8,800 on FanDuel, 8,700 on DraftKings. I really like the cheap price on Ragans, even though I don't fully believe yet. And I cost myself a couple spots in those days where he went out and struck out 12 or whatever his peaks were last year. My lack of faith kind of cost me in those spots, but it was only 12 starts. It's 96 innings. There's a ton of upside in this stat line. No denying it. 28.8% strikeout rate is terrific. A 3.71 xFIP is pretty good. 3.47 ERA is somewhat betrayed by the 3.71 xFIP, but this is not a huge difference, and this is not a bad xFIP. The whip is fine. The 14.1% swinging strike rate is terrific. Only a 28.5% CSW with a 14.1% swinging strike rate is a little bit suspect. Means you're not throwing many called strikes. 10.5% walk rate kind of backs that up. A little bit of command issues still maybe. Somebody in the chat mentioned a little bit of spring hiccups, but like I said, I don't really, especially with pitchers, put too much concern in that. But maybe a couple warning signs, maybe a couple things to at least be concerned about. The good news for him, he's going up against a fairly high strikeout Twins lineup. These are the averages in a lot of these, by the way, these little scrap notes down here. Just for like when I'm putting together the power index, it just makes it a lot faster than having to highlight the column and average it. So you can see the averages for the 2023 strikeout rates. It's at 23% for the full lineup, but that really benefits from the 16.4% from Manny Margot and the 16.8% from Carlos Santana, who they didn't have last year. The balance of that lineup, the other 7 guys in that lineup, the true average strikeout rate is 24.8% for those guys. Crests all the way up to 31.4 for Byron Buxton, who, still a star caliber talent, but that's a lot of strikeouts. Ryan Jeffers strikes out a bunch. Carlos Correa is an average strikeout guy. Royce Lewis was an average strikeout guy in his medium sample last year. So there's plenty of Ks available for Aggins. It could be a day where he goes out, dominates 6 innings, 12 Ks. Well, let's not go crazy. 6 innings, 9 Ks, punch out with a W, solid DFS score, win the day. I can totally see it. I just don't really want to get over the moon about it. And when a bunch of the field, I think, is on it, I don't really need to get there when there's other options on board. Pablo Lopez, major step forward last year when he joined the Twins. Year before, 23.6% strikeout rate in Miami, 3.75 ERA, 3.56 xFIP, 1.17 whip, a solid swinging strike rate. He was already a good pitcher. He became a very good pitcher last year, borderline great. 3.66 ERA, but a 3.29 xFIP under that. 1.15 whip, pushed the swinging strike rate up to 14.5%, pushed the CSW to 30.1. 29.2% strikeout rate up from the 23.6 in more innings, 194 innings, 32 starts. 6% walk rate, so he pushed the strikeout rate up by 6-ish points, and he cut the walk rate by 1.2. That is very, very noteworthy improvement. And like I said, he finished, I think, 4th in baseball with 200 plus strikeouts last year. An underappreciated season from Pablo Lopez last year. DFS winner a number of times. Reasonably strong for limiting power. A 3% home run rate is totally fine. 87 miles an hour of exit velo, not problematic. Neither is the barrel rate, the launch angle, or any of it. So I like both pitchers. I think you can absolutely roster both of them. They're right in the mix at the top of the board, next to one another, in fact. Pitchers 3 and 4 when sorted by FanDuel projection. Raggins is a little bit lower projected, it looks like, on the DraftKings slate. Not sure what that's about. I got to get my head around the DraftKings pitcher projections still, in terms of like how they relate to one another and how they function. First time I have them on the board actually talking about them during a show. So again, both pitchers definitely can fire up. I think you can get a little bit of Twins. What I really like about the Twins, oddly, is these two guys. I'm a sucker for Kyle Farmer's sneaky weird power. Hitting 7th today for 2,200 with triple position eligibility. I'll just take him as a one-off. He's just kind of a utility, Same thing with Willie Castro. Castro stole 33 bases last year, hit 9 home runs in his 409 plate appearances. He was by no means bad. He only cost 2,200 as well. Fills 3 positions. They fill third. They both fill third, and they both fill short. We've got second eligibility on Kyle Farmer and outfield eligibility on Castro. They're low priority options, but they can help make something else work. If you're building a 4-3 on FanDuel, maybe you don't use your 4-3-1. You don't use the 1 necessarily to go to Mookie Betts. Maybe you dip down to a fill second base, a tricky position anyway. Fill it with a $2,200 Kyle Farmer and see if you can grab a sneaky home run that nobody has. And then you've got the ability to spend a ton of money at other spots. He had 11 last year in just 369 plate appearances. Just a 152 ISO, no real premium contact to speak of. But he managed 14 home runs in 583 the year before, and 16 home runs in 529 the year before that. He's a little bit sneaky. And so is Castro for the stolen base upside and a little smattering of power. Actual reasonably much better home run hitter types, Byron Buxton for sure, 16.4% barrel, 50.2% hard hit. The issue with Buxton is staying on the field. Well, actually, there's multiple issues with Buxton. Staying on the field is one. He still hits for power and accrues counting stats when he's on the field. But he needs to improve the triple slash. Over his 347 plate appearances last year, we expect more than 207, 294 on the front end from Byron Buxton. ISO was terrific at 230. WRC Plus was down because those numbers were down. We need more than that from Byron Buxton, to be honest. But first and foremost, he's just got to be on the field. Guy's just always hurt. Ryan Jeffers in 335 plate appearances as a catcher last year. He's 3,600 on DraftKings. That's a playable catcher price. 26 on FanDuel. You don't really need him. 14 home runs in the moderate sample size. 213 ISO. Pretty solid. Created runs 38% better than average and a very strong on-base percentage for a catcher. Solid premium contact marks. Strikes out a ton, but a reasonably solid catcher. Royce Lewis, probably the star of this team right now. In 239 plate appearances called up last year. Went 309, 372, 548, 240 ISO, 15 home runs in the small sample, 6 stolen bases. Created runs for 55% better than league average in that sample. Sign me up for more of that from Royce Lewis. Absolutely. He's a $4,000 third baseman on FanDuel, $4,900 on DraftKings. That's actually a slightly more functional DraftKings price, I think, than the FanDuel side. Makes him a little bit tricky. One of only a few guys at the $4,000 level, but he's 9.25 in the home run model. I think there were 9 total guys above the 10 mark like Byron Buxton is. It's 9 guys. That's it. It's still highlighted from when I looked it up before. A lot of star caliber guys just missing. Several Reds in that group. Several Dodgers in that group. Or no, just one Dodger, right? Yeah, Shohei, Jordan Alvarez, Luis Robert, guys you would expect to get there. Nolan Gorman, kind of interesting. Another under-owned probably second baseman, but don't necessarily love the spot. So a limited number of options over the magic number on the home run model. Any of these 9s are close to that level, so you want to consider those guys. But again, we're going up against a very talented, by all accounts, pitcher. So it's not a priority stack by any means here with the Twins. And then we get into Carlos Correa, who had a very disappointing year last year after bouncing around and nobody wanted him in free agency. Landed back with the Twins. Ended up 230, 312, 399. Ouch. 4% worse than average creating runs. Ouch. 18 home runs is fine in 580 plate appearances, but we know there's a better player lurking in there. For 31, if you're going to Twins, I would definitely include him in stacks at shortstop. For 41, same thing on DraftKings. It's just he's not the draw. He's not the guy that's going to lead me to stacking Twins. That's more Royce Lewis at this point. And then like I said, the Farmer and Castro plays are just FanDuel one-offs. Carlos Santana, very low strikeout rate, hit 23 home runs in 619 plate appearances last year, a 189 ISO, 101 WRC plus. Max Kepler, solid left-handed power. Don't love him lefty here. 24 home runs, 224 ISO, a 124 WRC plus. He maintains, if I'm remembering correctly, some of his hitting quality lefty, but loses a fair chunk of his power upside. And if we're rostering Max Kepler, we're not really doing it for base hits. We're doing it for some of that power upside. Made very solid contact last year, though. 12.2% barrel, 47.6% hard hit. Needs to get over 500 plate appearances this year, but a solid option. And then Manny Margot at the bottom of the lineup. Minor potential for some counting stats. 4 home runs, 9 stolen bases, and 336 plate appearances last year. He's here this year to play defense and not strike out. I don't really like all that much about the Royals side of this one. Not really going up against Pablo. If I'm taking anybody out of this lineup, it's like that 4-man. Maybe that stretch to that 5-man if you're on DK. And it's just a straight line down through those guys. You can make a strong argument for Nelson Velasquez in the 8 spot, just given his power potential. But the core group is right there, 2 through 6. Michael Garcia in the leadoff spot, 4 home runs, 23 steals last year, a .086 ISO, created runs 16% worse than average while getting on base at a 323 clip. That's not all that impressive for a leadoff man. I don't need that in my lineup. It's an okay correlation play for a cheap price, if nothing else, at third base. But no real love for that. I would just start with Bobby Witt. Witt hit 30 home runs, 49 stolen bases, a monster season last year. If I'm remembering correctly, it was kind of a slow start on the power side, and he eventually caught up. Finished at a 218 ISO. The WRC plus was just 115, still 15% ahead of league average. He was at 99 the year before. So basic improvements for Bobby Witt. Fantastic for counting stats. Pretty good across the triple slash. Very good premium contact at 11.5% barrel, 45.4% hard hits. He's 3,800, which is an affordable shortstop price, especially if you're stacking him with cheap guys around him. Everybody else in this lineup is very cheap for their talent. On DraftKings, Bobby Witt is 6,200 today. That's just, I mean, everybody else's around him is cheap, so you can get there because you're averaging down the cost. You know, if you take the full 5-man, you average it down to 4,300 a person. So it's fine if you're taking the full Royal stack, but that makes the Witt, borderline unplayable as a one-off. That's just too high a price. He's very, very good. He could pay it off, no doubt, but you're sacrificing a lot to get to that salary. The Pasquatch, Vinny Pasquantino, solid bat, 9 home runs in just 260 plate appearances, a 190 ISO, 103 WRC plus. Puts bat on ball extremely well, just an 11.9% strikeout rate last year, 11.4% the year before that. Ended up with just 247, 324, 437. I think there's a lot of room for growth given his bat to ball skills. I think there's a decent amount of growth available in the premium contact department. He had a 46.9% hard hit rate 2 years ago, dropped to 40.1% last year, 8.8% barrels went down to 7.4. I could see a resurgence and a little bit of an uptick there, find some additional power. He's at an 8.14, reasonable option from the left side in our home run model. 4,500 at first base on DraftKings, 3,000 on FanDuel. Easy enough to get to if you're going to Royal stacks. I definitely wouldn't leave him out. Sal Perez has first base eligibility on the DraftKings slate. If you're stacking them, you probably want him at catcher, though, because you go Pasquatch and Sal. And then you get MJ with outfield eligibility only anyway. So Sal at catcher makes a ton of sense for 4,200. Still has power, if nothing else. 23 home runs last year. Just dipped to a 167 ISO, which isn't great. Was at an 86 WRC plus. We're getting to the back end of the talent level for Sal, but his price is way down. 2,900 is cheap for Sal Perez on FanDuel. 4,200 very, very affordable on DraftKings. Still pulling an 8.67 in the home run model, if nothing else. Doesn't walk a lot, doesn't do a ton else at the plate. Just a 292 on base wasn't good. That's why his WRC plus cratered. But the power's still real. MJ from the left side. Really believe in this bat. It's another guy that just based on the premium contact, what I see right here, I like the upside for MJ to find more power. He's only 3,300 in the outfield on DraftKings, 11.4% barrels last year, 49.6% hard hits. Double digits across the double-digit barrel rate, 43.5% hard hits the year before. He strikes out a lot, but he walks a fair amount. That was true in the minors as well. Reasonable expectation of him being a high strikeout, but 3 true outcomes type hitter with great contact profile. He had 16 home runs and 602 plate appearances. The power was kind of out oddly last year, despite that premium contact. 163 ISO, just a 92 WRC plus. I'm buying the upside on MJ Melendez this season. At the end of the season when he's at 30-plus home runs, and I'm saying, remember on opening day when I said, that'll be one of my guys. I'll remember. Hunter Renfroe finds his way to the Royals. Hit 20 home runs last year in a down season, 548 plate appearances. He had 60 across the 2 seasons before that, though. 29 in 2022 and 31 in 2021. He's still a premium right-handed power bat. He just dipped to a 6.1% barrel, 38.8% hard hit. He was in and out of the lineup a little bit. Still made 548 plate appearances, but a little bit in and out of the lineup. Cost him some consistency, I think, last season. Never really got going with the Angels. Only 2,600 on FanDuel, only 3,700 on DraftKings. If you're going to that 5-man Royals, he would be my bottom end. Adam Frazier, totally skippable. Kyle Isbell, totally skippable. Frazier does have a little bit of... if I like Kyle Farmer, I can't not like Adam Frazier at least a little. 13 home runs, 11 steals last year, but an underproductive 93 WRC plus. But the guy in the middle here, Nelson Velasquez, 4,000 on DraftKings in the outfield, 2,700 on FanDuel. He's got a 6.7 in the home run model today. In a small 179 plate appearance sample last year, he had a 21.4% barrel rate with 48.2% hard hits. I think this is the more realistic numbers. 13.3%, which is still very good, and a 41.7%. That was across just 206 plate appearances. But more to the point, he hit 17 home runs in 179 opportunities last year. There's major power potential there. You just got to catch him on the right day. Otherwise, he is a high strikeout, low output hitter in basically every other facet. So you're playing the home run lottery if you roster Nelson Velasquez. So both pitchers, solid yes, solid endorsements. Love the price on Raggins, even though I don't fully believe. I'll have some. Pablo, across the board, no issues with it. I think he's appropriately priced. A little bit of, maybe a little bit of Twins, probably not much Royals. Blue Jays and the Rays. Let's see if we got confirmed lineups. Oh, we got a bunch of confirmed lineups. Let's see. The Rays is in. Where is it? It looks mostly similar. A little different down toward the bottom. All right. Blue Jays lineup's not in yet. We also got when we get there, the Yanks, the White Sox, the Marlins, the Angels, the Orioles, and the Astros are all in. Let's just see if anything's weird in that Angels lineup. Rendon, Hicks, Trout, Ward, Drury, Shanuel, Sano, O'Hop, Neto. That's exactly what we have in the projected versions. Orioles lineup, Gunnar in the leadoff spot, Adley, Mountcastle, Santander, Austin Hayes batting 5th, Westberg 6, Ced Mullins jumps to 7, Ramon Urias and Jorge Mateo round things out. So that's the same group of players, but the order switched. Gunnar jumping up to the leadoff spot makes him more appealing if you're going to that game. Still a lefty-lefty, but not against a great lefty. I don't dislike Gunnar in that situation. Adley's fine. Ryan Mountcastle and Santander, I think, switched spots from the projected lineup, and Austin Hayes dropped from 1st to 5th, while Cedric Mullins climbed from 9th to 7th. So Ced Mullins gains a little ground, gets a little bit more interesting, but again, he's another guy lefty-lefty. Marlins lineup, Jake Berger drops from 3rd to 5th. It's Arias, Bell, Dela Cruz, Chisholm, Berger, Sanchez, Timmy Anderson 7th, Nick Gordon in the lineup hitting 8th, and Nick Fortes hitting 9th. Getting back on track here. No real love for Jose Barrios. I think he's wildly mispriced on the FanDuel slate at 96. He projects out just fine, right alongside some of the guys that are a step below the premium pitchers, but again, not a ton of daylight between any of these projections with a bunch of number ones going. I just never really bought into the Jose Barrios thing. He had one good season, 26.1% strikeout rate over 32 starts in 2021. 3.52 ERA, a 3.59 xFIP. He was good that year, a 106 whip. The next season in 172 innings over the same 32 starts, he dipped to 19.8% strikeouts, went up to a 5.23 ERA. The xFIP went up to 4.21. This xFIP is a lot better than that ERA, but they're both a lot higher than the year before. And then last year, he climbed back up a little bit, 23.5% strikeout rate, totally respectable. 3.65 ERA, a 4.01 xFIP, 1.19 whip is a little higher than you'd necessarily want, but it's fine. 3.20% home run rate allowed, a little bit of premium contact allowed, but nothing tragic. I just think he's mostly league average type pitcher, maybe a little tiny tick above league average, and he gets credit for being better than that, especially in this FanDuel price. At 71 on DraftKings, I absolutely think you can play him as an SP2. I think he's got enough talent to pay off that price. I just don't like him at 96 on FanDuel. Seems broken. There's also a lot of just really good hitters in the Rays lineup. But there are a fair amount of strikeouts available, 22.9% on average for that lineup. On their side, Zach Eflin, despite being projected like a point less, he's 8,500 on FanDuel. He's 7,300 on DraftKings. So on FanDuel, I actually like him a little bit better than Jose Barrios, given the cheaper price. But I do think there's just better options. He had a 26.5% strikeout rate in a career year last year, made 31 starts through 177 2/3. Just a 3.4% walk rate is spectacular. A 3.50 ERA and an even better 3.13 xFIP. He was outstanding last season. 1.02 whip. Year before, just a 20.8% strikeout rate in a much smaller sample, 22.4% the year before that. But his walk rates have always been low. His whip has been pretty strong throughout his career. So I don't dislike Eflin by any means. I think he's totally serviceable at 73. Very playable at 85. It's just the fact that he's here on the board. Not going up against any kind of a pushover team or anything like that. The Blue Jays aren't great. They've got some issues. They've definitely got a weak bottom half. But the top end of that lineup is still pretty damn good. So a little bit of concern throwing him into that. But Eflin is appropriately priced, if nothing else, on this slate. If you're looking at the Blue Jays side of things, George Springer needs to, well, he finished 21 homers, 20 stolen bases, 104 WRC plus, just a 147 ISO though. That ISO is down pretty hard from 205 in 2022 and extremely hard from 291 in 2021. So Springer's got some work to do to get back to form. Still has enough time to do it. Not an old player. 21 homers, 20 steals is still respectable. 258, 327, 405. Still above average for run creation over 683 plate appearances, but we know there's a better player there. Vladdy Guerrero also needs to improve this year. Had a down season last year. 26 home runs is fine. It's totally respectable output for anybody, but we expect more from Vlad. A 179 ISO, we definitely expect more. 118 WRC plus is fine, but he should be better than that. Put up a very similar year in terms of premium contact, in terms of strikeouts and walks. Nothing really changed about that. A lot of happenstance in some of the power numbers. 11.1% barrel rate. It was 11.2% the year before. 49.2% hard hits. It was 50.4% the year before. Vladdy's expensive. He's difficult to get to at first base. On DraftKings, you've got a positional blocker with Vladdy and Justin Turner both being only first base eligible. Can't get them both in the same stack. Obviously, we like Vladdy a little bit better, but Justin Turner is a spectacular hitter in his own right. You want to have them both. On FanDuel, you get first and third. You've also got the util spot, so you don't have to worry about it. Vladdy's 56 on the DraftKings slate. It's a little pricey, but you can see he's pushing the 10 mark in our home run model, almost at the magic number, so there's a lot of upside there. Bo Bichette, 20 home runs, 306, 339, 475 last year, 25% better than average, creating runs to lead the team. Their best overall hitter, their starting shortstop, locked in at a relatively high price at $5,300 on DraftKings, but pretty easily worth it. He's only $3,300 somehow on the FanDuel slate. That is cheap. Him being at 33, Springer being at 32, and then Justin Turner being at 29 makes this an easily gettable FanDuel stack. That's an average of 3,200, 3,250, total of 13 grand for those four hitters. You throw them up against a good pitcher who's not going to walk a lot of them. But these guys, one thing they do very well, all four of them, is not strike out. Everybody well below a 20% strikeout rate. These three draw walks at a pretty decent clip. Bo Bichette doesn't really. But there's a lot of good hitting in that group. So getting those guys for the price, even against a guy like Eflin, I really don't mind that at all. I'm not sure how much I end up going to it. I'm not sure how high a priority it becomes, but they're more affordable on FanDuel, so they're more interesting than they are on DraftKings. And then, like I said, let's talk Turner real quick. 276, 345, 455. Hit 23 home runs, finished the year 14% above average for run creation, still a 179 ISO. He's not the hitter he once was, but he's still a very good hitter with a very good eye. Doesn't strike out much, 17.6% strikeouts, 8.1% walks. Just not quite the power that he used to have, but still very productive. Had 96 ribbies and 86 runs scored last year. So for DFS purposes, Justin Turner's still a young man. Dalton Varsho, disappointing year last year. 2020 upside if things go well. He went 2016 in a down season, 86 WRC plus last year. Lefty bat for 3,600 in the outfield. You can do worse than that if you're stacking up this team. He's 2,700 on FanDuel. Alejandro Kirk hit 8 home runs in 422 plate appearances, kind of an afterthought at catcher. Kevin Biggio, kind of problematic at second base or first base. He's very, very cheap, 2,400 on FanDuel, 29 on DraftKings. 9 homers, 5 steals last year, over 338 plate appearances. Not much to write home about. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is a slap-hitting utility man, miscast in a starting role. I would not play him under really any circumstances. He did hit 6 home runs, stole 14 bases last year, 18% below average creating runs. And there are idiots in the stands at Yankee Stadium calling for him to be brought back already, which is just completely bonkers. Kevin Kiermaier. A lot of that applies to Kevin Kiermaier. He's a light hitting, defensively oriented, excellent center fielder. 265, 322, 419 last year. 8 home runs, most of which came, I think, at the beginning of the season. 14 stolen bases. He's all right as a mixer for very, very cheap, but he's nobody's priority. The outstanding Rays lineup. Starts with the terrific Yandy Diaz at the top, 334, 10, 522 for Yandy, a 192 ISO. Created runs 64% better than average across 600 plate appearances in a monster breakout season last year. 22 home runs. Didn't manage to steal himself a base, but an awesome season from Yandy last year. Just kept on giving all year, too. 54% hard hits for the season, a 9.5% barrel rate. Only struck out 15.7% of the time, walked at a 10.8% clip. Sets him apart. He had a 10.8% strikeout rate the year before. He is a terrific hitter, probably going to challenge for a batting title this year. Brandon Lau came back. Decent home run output, over 436 last year. Dealt with some injuries, was in and out of the lineup again. Platoons in a fair number of games like this team does at basically every spot. Still had a 212 ISO, created runs 17% better than average. 9.13 in the home run model makes him one of the better power hitting second basemen available on this slate. For 3,400, you could do worse as a one-off at second base. You definitely do worse in stacks. Only 4,000 on the DraftKings slate. Plenty of opportunity there. Gundacker's in the chat. What's going on, Gun? Gun's been wrestling and chilling, missing the MLB grind. I was just saying before, we got to get you on a show, and you know I'm a fan of that idea. People are calling for it in the Discord and everything. Hope the wrestling's going well, bud. I see your tweets from time to time with little video clips and stuff of you smashing guys. Looks like it's going pretty well. Looks like it's also just fun. Fun to be involved with, fun to do. What else is going on? Arcathel's has got a 3-3-2 one-off on DK single entry. Yeah, I think you can get a little bit more creative with those constructions on DK. I do like to typically build more full stacks, more complete stacks, but no real issues with that, depending on, of course, who's in it. Continuing with the Rays, Randy Arozarena, terrific hitter, 12.3% barrels, 48% hard hits last year, a big step forward from the previous season. Finished the year with 23 homers, 22 steals, a 126 WRC plus. Very, very solid contributor for this team. He's 5,400 on DraftKings. Yandy is 5,200. They're very difficult to get to. On FanDuel, they're also pricey. 37 for Yandy and 36 for Arozarena. Plus, you throw in 3,400 for Brandon Lau. You're getting a little pricey at the top of the Rays lineup. You kind of need to work in some of the guys later in the batting order to average that price down. You've got a very capable Harold Ramirez, who is a hit tool-oriented player. He did hit 12 home runs last year, but you roster him for the 313, 353 front end of the triple slash, the 128 WRC plus, the 18.2% strikeout rate. Puts bat on ball extremely, extremely well. Only cost 2,600, 4,000 on DraftKings. Very playable. Isaac Paredes, multi-position eligible, third base, first base on both sides for a fair price. 4,400 is a little high on DraftKings, but he did hit 31 home runs to justify it last year. 238 ISO, 137 WRC plus. See reasonable expectation for solid home run output. Call it, maybe 25, maybe 30 plus is a little bit high. But he had 20 in just 381 plate appearances the season before, so there's a little bit of support for it. What I don't love is the low premium contact number, 6.4% barrel, 37.6% hard hit 2 years ago, and 5.9%, and just amazingly 28.3% hard hits, and yet hit 31 home runs. So sometimes it's not all about how frequently you hit it hard. It's just about the few times that you do it, making sure the ball actually gets over the wall. Richie Palacios, 6 home runs, 2 steals, nothing really important over 102 plate appearances. He's all right. You can mix him in. Jose Siri, a lot more interesting. 25 homers, 12 steals, a 106 WRC plus, and a monster 272 ISO over 364 plate appearances last year. A lot of guys with seasons like that on this team where it's just 350 to 450 plate appearances, a little bit of platooning, 20 plus home runs, a dozen plus steals. This team really puts things together well. Jose Caballero's kind of in that mix now, at least with the stolen base upside. Swiped 26 bags in 280 plate appearances last year. Rene Pinto, kind of an interesting catcher for a little bit of pop. 6 home runs, not a great total, but it came in only 105 plate appearances. In that small sample, 15.9% barrel, 40.6% hard hits, a 204 ISO. Something to work with there. Just 83 plate appearances the year before that, only 2 home runs, but there's a little something to work with for Rene Pinto. So, yes to Eflin at cheap pricing. up against the top-heavy Blue Jays lineup. Yes to Barrios, but only on DraftKings at 71. No interest in him at 96 on FanDuel. Even though he projects within range of the top-end guys, I just don't want to get there at 9,600 on FanDuel. And then I do think you can roster top end of the Blue Jays. And then various combinations of the Rays. Like the 1 through 5 is particularly strong. But you also get Siri in there. You get Pinto in there. So the Rays are relatively stackable. It's just a matter of figuring out how to use these guys appropriately to average down these prices on either site. DraftKings does you a favor by putting Lau at 4,000. Let's keep on trucking. Handful of games to go. 4 left. We've been going for an hour 44. That's not bad. 12:47. I was saying to myself, man, if I can manage to get off by 1 o'clock, I'll have 2 hours to build lineups. I didn't think that was going to happen, and it's sure not. Biggie to talk about here. 10-1, most expensive pitcher on the FanDuel slate, Tariq Skubal, looks terrific. At 9-1 on the DraftKings slate, I don't think he's the most expensive. Yeah, Tyler Glasnow at 95. And Pablo at 93 are both more expensive, actually. So Skubal, the third most expensive DraftKings pitcher. Second highest DraftKings overall pitching projection. Top pitching projection on the FanDuel slate. Looks like a potential monster for the season. Like I said at the top of the show, one of those guys that was just on every single industry list of breakout, sleeper, mid-round draft pick, whatever you want to call it. But there was a lot of industry buzz about get Tariq Skubal in your lineups this year. 80 and a third last year over 15 starts. He had a 32.9% strikeout rate against just a 4.5% walk rate. That was way up from the 24.5% that he had in 117 and 2/3 the year before. 6.7% walk rate came down. The 3.52 ERA dropped to 2.8. The 3.40 xFIP dropped to 2.57. The 1.16 WHIP went to 0.90. The 11.7% swinging strikes went to 14.9%. CSW went up accordingly. The barrels came down. The hard hits were about the same. The average exit velocity came down. The home runs came down slightly. They were already terrifically low. There's really nothing not to like about Tariq Skubal other than the potential for injury, the potential for, at least early in the season, maybe a little bit of shaving down of his innings, and the fact that he's just going to be popular at a high price against a pathetic White Sox team. That said, we do have a little bit of power upside coming from the White Sox. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, both over the magic number for home runs. That's just on their raw talent alone. Lou Bob hit 38 home runs, stole 20 bases. Won a big place in my heart last year. Love that player. 278 ISO, 128 WRC+. Big part of the Dynasty team now. Acquired him last year in a trade that I've talked about a number of times. Eloy just needs to kind of stay in the lineup. He had 18 home runs, a 169 ISO, not great power output last season, but there's questions as to how much of his dips are attributable to all of these injuries that he takes. Just 489 last year, 327 plate appearances the year before, 231 the year before that. It's just not in the lineup enough. There's tons of talent there. There's 30 home run upside there, but we need to see it. We need him to make 600 plate appearances. The 489 last year was a reasonably good total for, compared to the other two seasons anyway. But I think the power output was hurt by those injuries. Paul DeJong joins this team, 3,700, 2,400 across sites. 2,400 for Paul DeJong is pretty cheap. He didn't have a good season in terms of the triple slash last year. 207, 258, 355 is disastrous. He was 34% worse than average creating runs. Missed a big chunk of the season, made 400 total plate appearances. But the power was still, at least the home run potential is still there. He's very cheap. It's just a matter of if you're going to White Sox as like a totally wildly contrarian stack against a popular pitcher. I probably would look to work in Paul DeJong. I would probably be going straight line down through these four. On DraftKings, I'd probably go up, not down the ladder. I'd probably include Moncada and go 1 through 5. I know it's straight line and nobody likes straight lines. You could use Benintendi in that situation. It would still be a straight line, but you'd be cheaper. I just am not a Benintendi fan by any means. I think Moncada's got a little bit more talent. That said, he's also been disappointing for his major league career compared to the hype when he came into the league. Just 11 home runs in 357 plate appearances last season, a 98 WRC plus, a 165 ISO. Year before, just 12 home runs in 433, 14 home runs in 616 before that. Didn't turn into a star. Not a bad player. Interesting to see him leading off. Well, if he does lead off. Do we have this lineup? I should have checked that. We do have this lineup. God damn it. All right, so that changes slightly because Benintendi is in the leadoff spot. So Benny gets a slight bit more playable, but you can see the projections don't really improve all that much. The home run upside is very, very low. He had a 2.9% barrel rate, a 26.8% hard hit rate. He doesn't really strike out much, but he doesn't really do anything in exchange for not striking out. He just kind of puts the ball in play weekly. 5 home runs, 13 steals, a 326 on base, 13% worse than average creating runs. Moncada hitting second. Everything I was saying about him just a minute ago still stands. The rest of this group is kind of intact with Lubab, Eloy Jimenez, and then Andrew Vaughn moves from, I think he was third in the projected, down to fifth. Reasonable expectation for more power from Andrew Vaughn. He hit 21 homers last year, a 171 ISO, puts bat on ball at a fairly productive power clip. You know, those are decent premium contact numbers. They're not great. You'd like to see the barrels above 10. Hard hits are pretty good at 46.5, 48.4 the year before that. Came into the league with a, strong prospect profile. Has, I don't want to say under-delivered, but he definitely hasn't over-delivered. I don't think he's necessarily met his promise. 103 WRC plus last year, a respectable enough triple slash, but needs to do more at the plate. He's very cheap at $3,000 at first base. $3,800 is particularly cheap on DK, but again, it's only if you're going to White Sox just so you can target Tariq Skubal, which probably not a good idea. Kevin Pillar, no thank you. Martin Maldonado, no thank you. Nicky Lopez, no thank you. Those guys are indicative of why it's a good spot for Tariq Skubal and why the White Sox are going to suck again this year. Tiger side, let's talk cheap pitching. I did mention him. I called him out when we scrolled over to the pitching board. Garrett Crochet. This is probably the highest projection you're going to see on him. There's some of 2 years ago lingering in there. He's been a reliever. He pitched 54 and a third innings 2 years ago, struck out 28.3% of hitters, walked 11.7%, which is incredibly concerning. 2.82 ERA, a 3.95 xFIP, which is probably the much more realistic number. I think we're expecting, 4+ in terms of the ERA, 1.2, 1.3 kind of a whip. 12% swinging strike rate is very encouraging. Good to see. Goes well with the 28.3% strikeout rate. Last year, he just made through 12.2 innings out of the pen. 18.8% strikeout rate in the tiny sample, 20.3% walk rate is hilariously bad. 3.55 ERA betrayed by a 7.16 whip. He was awful in those 12 and 2/3 innings. But we're going to forgive that because his 12 and 2/3 innings of work out of the pen after missing a full year. He didn't pitch in 2022. If we get a return to form, he's been throwing 100 miles an hour in spring training. He won the opening day starter job. He was announced a couple of weeks ago as the opening day starter, and FanDuel still dropped him in at $5,500. By far the cheapest pitcher on the slate, like $2,000, $1,500 cheaper than everybody else. And the guys he compares to price-wise are extremely low end. On DraftKings at 65, he's just in that mix of SP2s. But on FanDuel, if you want to stack like Dodgers and Reds together, if you want to stack Dodgers and Yankees, Astros and Dodgers, Astros and Reds, whoever's high priced. If you want to grab 8 high priced one-off guys and put them all together, Garrett Crochet is your path to doing that. $5,500 is an incredibly effective price on FanDuel. Even if he falls way short of my projection, and this is not in a lot of innings, it's just kind of on that strikeout upside. I think there's a reasonable path to success, even if he doesn't crush the slate, which I don't really have realistic expectations for him to do. I just think he pays off that price. I think we get just enough from him where the monumental gain that we get at between bats and combinations of bats that are just completely otherwise unavailable if you're rostering anybody else at pitcher, if you hit that right combination, he doesn't need to go off. He just needs to be okay. So I expect to have a lot of Garrett Crochet. He's in my placeholder right now. I built a very chalky, cheesy, Starsy kind of a lineup, but that's what you can do with him. So there's a lot of high-end ability there, or a lot of high-end potential. He is incredibly wild. He walks too many people. He has no command, limited control. But the 100-mile-an-hour fastball is compelling. The strikeout ability is compelling. I also like the fact that he's a lefty going up against this improving Tigers team. 3 of their key hitters this year are lefties. Riley Green's a lefty. Colt Keith is a lefty. Parker Meadows is a lefty. Kerry Carpenter's also a lefty, but is not in the lineup here. So several of their key bats left-handed. That always bodes well, or not always. There are some guys like Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, who completely defy lefty-lefty. But by and large, lefty-lefty advantage to the pitcher. So I like that he's getting that upside against some very young left-handed hitters. Riley Green turned into a very, very good hitter last year. 416 plate appearances from the left side. He went 288, 349, 447, 119 WRC plus. He had 11 homers, stole 7 bases. Upside for more than that this year, especially on the back of an 11.3% barrel, 46.6% hard hits. I think there's more expectation for power there. Spencer Torkelson from the right side took a major step forward last year. Hit 31 home runs, a 213 ISO, 107 WRC plus, 50.5% hard hits with a 14.1% barrel rate. All those are way, way up year over year. He was looking like a disaster after his first year and completely turned the ship around. And I think he's a burgeoning star at first base. I really do. I think there's a ton of upside there. 3,300 at first base is cheap for him on FanDuel. 4,900 is about right on DraftKings. 47 for Riley Green on DraftKings. A little bit expensive for a guy who hasn't really done it for power yet. Then you get the other pieces around this lineup. We don't have the confirmed yet. Matt Vierling, he's okay. About average kind of hitter, 261, 329, 388, created runs as 99 WRC plus, 10 homers, 6 steals in 530 plate appearances. He's fine. Strikes out around league average. He does everything around league average. He's cheap. If he's leading off, you can stack him ahead of these hitters if you want to go to the Tigers. And I do think, especially if you're rostering Garrett Crochet in big chunks, I think there's good cause to probably hedge that with a few Tiger stacks. That's my plan anyway. Those stacks are going to mostly include like Green, Torkelson, Colt Keith, maybe some Kana. Depends how the lineup falls. But it'll be focused kind of in the middle here. I do not like Gio Urshela. I think he's dramatically overrated. .075 ISO, 92 WRC plus across 228 last year. Hit 2 home runs. 299 average, a 329 on base percentage. Who cares? 3.9% barrels, 33.2% hard hits. Year before that, 13 home runs in 551 plate appearances, a 144 ISO. He was 20% better than average creating runs, or 19% over 551 plate appearances. He's got decent contact skills. He's an okay contact hitter. He's come through in the clutch a couple times, which gains him a little bit more reputationally than it should. But for fantasy purposes, for what we're doing here, he's not that great. He does have triple position eligibility for only 2,200, so there is that. He's a functional piece of the slate, especially if he's hitting second, but he's not a piece that I like and not a piece that I'm really endorsing all that hard. I wish somebody else was in that spot. Mark Canha, reasonable right-handed veteran talent, 11 home runs last year, 11 steals, a 111 WRC plus, nice little theme going there. 507 plate appearances, that was down a little bit, I think. 13 home runs the year before that, 17 home runs 2 years ago. That was the number I was thinking of. Canha's never been an extreme hitter by any sense. Moderate premium contact numbers. Doesn't strike out much. Walks a little bit. Good at getting to first base. 355 on base percentage last year. If nothing else, he could probably get on and score some runs for this team. You can make a reasonable argument that he should be the leadoff hitter. Javi Baez, unfortunately passed away 5 years ago or 4 years ago whenever he signed with this team, and has not been seen since. 222, 267, 325 last year with a 104 ISO, 61 WRC plus, 9 home runs. Atrocious season for Javi. 22.9% strikeout rate, 4.4% walk. Anemic premium contact numbers. Tigers lineup just dropped. And it's a little bit different. Andy Ibanez taking the leadoff spot. Put that in the wrong spot, but good to have it in the projected anyway. All right, so now we're dealing with Andy Ibanez. Torkelson moves to second. Riley Green now third. Kana hitting fourth now and Veerling fifth. That's weird. Colt Keith in the same spot. Parker Meadows in the same spot. Javi Baez drops to eighth where you need him even less. Everything I said about all those other guys is still true. The lineup situation just shifted a little bit. Ibanez, 11 home runs last year, a 103 WRC+. plus. If I remember, he hits lefties decently. Let's take a quick little detour and look for Andy Ibanez splits. Why not? Nothing crazy. 261, 297, 523 with a 118 WRC+. plus. It is an uptick over his righty-righty numbers. Does have a big ISO. 261, or did. 261 ISO against lefties last year. It's only 118 plate appearances. 6 of his 11 home runs came against lefties. Reasonable output, but nothing to get too excited about. Outside of the fact that he's got triple position for 2,300 on FanDuel, dual position for 3,300 on DraftKings. Maybe it makes the lineup a little bit more flexy in a stack, but that's about it. Colt Keith is a premium prospect. Kid hit a bunch of home runs in the minors. They're expecting big things from Colt Keith. He's a lefty going up against a lefty. Not necessarily ideal for his MLB debut, but locks in at third base for just 2,400 on the FanDuel slate, just 3,000 on the DraftKings slate. By the way, all these home run marks are low. In his 70 whatever it is innings for his career, Crochet's only given up 3 home runs, so it's having kind of an impact on the home run marks for the Tigers. Realistically, they're maybe a little bit higher than this if you gave them a little bit more sample to allow a few more homers. But kind of is what it is spot, and maybe that is realistic. Don't know. Man, it's not going to go well for Garrett Crochet. He's gonna pitch like 3 terrible innings and come out of the game. Jake Rogers hit a bunch of home runs. 21 home runs in 365 plate appearances. Kind of cheap, kind of sneaky catcher. 3,400 on DraftKings where you need him. 2,400 where you don't. And then Parker Meadows, a reasonable breakout candidate. 3 home runs and 8 stolen bases in 145 plate appearances last year. Hits from the left side, but there's some upside there. That's a kid that they like. They're making sure he's in the lineup basically every day at this point. I don't love the spot in the lineup. 2,900 is a good price. 3,900 is an okay price on DraftKings for him. So big yes for Tariq Skubal. Obvious off the top of the board. Definitely a yes for me for Garrett Crochet, but you are rolling the dice. You're throwing a dart. You're making a bet, whatever you want to call it. It's a long shot. 5,500 though makes a lot of things work in your FanDuel lineups. At 65 on DraftKings, I would play some, but he's just kind of an also ran cheap SP2 on DraftKings. Not the same play not nearly the same play on from site to site. No real love for the White Sox, really at all, outside of maybe the 2 home run hitters. Just as one-offs, maybe some Lou Bob one-offs I get to. And then, as I said, maybe some hedge stacks of Tigers, if nothing else. If I've got 10 Garrett Crochet lineups, should I grab 2 Detroit Tigers lineups? Probably. Helps in the event that goes completely sideways. Yeah, a lot of the lineups have dropped ACP. Yeah, exactly, Lone Wolf. If you use Crochet on FanDuel, try to get to combinations others can't get to spend up for pitcher. And that's literally every other pitcher on the slate. There are combinations that Garrett Crochet will access that no one else can access. So just make sure that you're getting to them. Typically, I am frequently pointing out you don't need to spend all your money on a baseball slate, and that is very true. But when you go to a value play like that, it becomes more important to spend all your money so that you are accessing those combinations. It's not an automatic win. It's not like getting a $3,000 min-priced point guard with suddenly 36 minutes in the NBA. But it's an angle. It's an angle to take, and you want to make sure that you're filling out the angle completely. So, yes, Lone Wolf nailed it. Gundacker. Former Yankees are only good immediately after leaving the Yankees. I don't think Gunn was here from my extended Joey Gallo discussion earlier. Where are you at on Gallo this year, Gunn? I think you know I love him. Giants at the Pods. Pretty good pitching matchup. Yu Darvish was not great in the Seoul series. Came out after, I want to say, 3 2/3. A lot of pitches just in the dirt. A lot of Yu Darvish, just trying to work shit out kind of pitches. Look like a spring training Yu Darvish start. Dude's got 37 different pitches that he can throw. Mixes it up start to start, year to year. So just kind of trying to figure out what's going to work for him this year, and wasn't necessarily on point, but you got to look at that one as kind of a spring training start. So I think we're getting his first official actual start today. 136 innings last year, 24.6% strikeout rate, an uglier 4.56 ERA than we've seen from him in years past, a 3.92 xFIP, not ideal. Definitely he's 37 now, so he's aged up. A little bit of the talent is slipping, but there's still premium upside there on the right day. He's going up against a fairly high strikeout Giants lineup. There are multiple guys in the 28 range, a couple 26s that I can see there, only one guy below 20%. And then Jung-Hoo Lee probably not going to strike out all that much at the top of that lineup. But there's a lot of strikeouts in that Giants lineup. So if Darvish finds his form, I think there's reasonable expectation for him to deliver around where that median projection is. It's a couple points off of the slate leaders, but there's a little touch of upside there. And since it is his second start, maybe you've got a little bit more of a trajectory towards 6 innings. Yep. Gallo would be great with no expectations in low pressure environments. Can't get more tied into that description than playing first base every day for the Washington Nationals this year. Low pressure for sure. Toronto lineups in. All right, we'll take a look for anything weird. Are either of these lineups in? Oh, these are both in. Let me grab these real quick. Or just at my own pace. Use the links, asshole. Got these handy links to navigate back and forth on here, and I never actually clicked them. All right, so that's Yu Darvish. He's another one that 9,200 just doesn't really work for me on the FanDuel slate, despite kind of liking the pitcher in a vacuum. I don't love this spot for him at 92 on FanDuel, but I think at 82 he's highly playable on DraftKings. I think that works pretty well. It's similar, but I like Logan Webb more on FanDuel than I like Yu Darvish. I think he's got a little bit more of a ceiling. 9,500 projects out better, obviously. But that said, I don't think he's going to be a priority option for me today. He eats innings. He threw 216 innings last year, made 33 starts, put up a 22.8% strikeout rate. What I always like about Logan Webb is that he's difficult to hit home runs against, difficult to generate extra base hits against. Kept launch angle to a 0.6 degree average launch last year, 3.1 degrees the year before that, negative 0.5 in 2021. Home run rates of just 1.51%, 1.40%, and then a little jump up to 2.35% last year. That was on the back of a slightly increased barrel rate, slightly increased hard hit rate, and a little bit more exit velo. But again, some of that is happenstance. Home runs are wonky. So that was the guy I had in mind when I said that we were going to bring that up again. That spike is a few home runs across the year. It's not really all that noticeable when everything else basically is the same. 3.6% walk rate is pretty spectacular, down from 6.2%. 2.96 xFIP below his 3.25 ERA is very nice to see. It reversed the trend from the year before when both marks were still very, very good. Logan Webb is a very good pitcher who throws a lot of innings. So I don't know that I'd go to him in this spot at this FanDuel price against this Padres team. Pod's very top heavy again this season. But all of that is to say that at 8,400, I think Logan Webb's another guy that looks a lot better on the DraftKings slate at price than he does on FanDuel. So I like Webb a little bit better than I like Darvish on FanDuel, but they're both a little high priced for me on that site, and they're both more in play on DraftKings. That was the summary version of that. Giants lineup off the top, KBO rookie Jung-Hoo Lee. Premium hit tool expectations, but we've seen a lot of KBO guys struggle initially. It happened to Ha-Seong Kim for basically 2 seasons before he really broke out last year. He had an okay second season. But his first season was really messy. We've seen it with a lot of Korean hitters to come over. Kid's got very, very strong bat-to-ball skills, though. Kiwoom Heroes veteran. Just a 3.93 in the home run model. Seems like a good fit in the leadoff spot. Gets on base at an aggressive clip. Hitting ahead of Jorge Soler is a killer spot. We saw what that did for Luis Arias' run-scoring ability last year. Not saying this kid's going to go out and hit 350 to start with a 460 whatever on base percentage. He is not Luis Arias, but he's a good hitter and he's in front of a bomber in Jorge Soler. Soler hit 36 home runs last year, had a 262 ISO, 15% barrels, 48% hard hits. Comes to San Francisco as a conquering hero with the highest home run mark in the lineup today. 3,400 is a pretty good price for all that power. He's 4,900 on DraftKings. That's kind of high. Much as I might like Jorge Soler's power, there are downsides to rostering Jorge Soler in a lot of spots. That said, though, he did have a decent walk rate, and he did cut his strikeout rate last year pretty significantly. 29.4 down to 24.3 with all that power is a pretty appreciable improvement. Lamont Wade, spectacular getting on base. 373 on base last year. 256, 373, 417 to finish the season. He was well above 400 for a big chunk of the season before a dip late. 122 WRC plus to finish things off. Hit 17 home runs from the left side. Has some ability. 3,400 on DraftKings is pretty cheap for him. 18.3% strikeout rate and a very good 14.6% walk rate. Respectable enough premium contact. 9.1% barrels with 39.8% hard hits. For just 2,800 at first base on FanDuel, it's pretty good. 3,400 at first base on DraftKings is definitely good. And not an unhittable pitcher in Yu Darvish by any means. I would take a couple shares of Giant stacks if I'm rostering a handful of Yu Darvish, just as a little hedge position. As a raw, just on its own stack, if I have no Darvish, maybe a couple shares if I'm building out 150 lineups. Maybe if I'm building like 20, 25. You can get to the Giants a couple times in there. They added Matt Chapman for some power upside. He had 17 home runs. Most of them came at the beginning of the season last year before a big dip. He spent most of the year above a 200 ISO, but then fell to 185 before things were done. He was significantly higher for WRC+, but still finished 10% above average for run creation. And despite a dip, he did finish at a 17.1% barrel rate and a 56.1% hard hit. And those are sustained numbers over time. Matt Chapman still makes very, very good premium contact. He lost a few home runs last year. Partly probably to Toronto's ballpark, partly to happenstance. I think there's reasonable upside back into the 20s for home run power, if nothing else from Matt Chapman. He's very affordable on this slate. Mike Yastrzemski from the left side, 36, 2,800 across sites, pretty affordable. Okay power, 15 home runs last year, did have a nice 212 ISO, did have a 44% hard hit rate, 9.8% barrel rate. Was better than that for premium contact the year before. Strikes out a lot, but walks a little bit. Decent run creator, 112 WRC plus. A lot of guys in this lineup for whatever they might be. They create runs. Thairo Estrada, second base only for 43 on DraftKings. Second and shortstop, a little more valuable on FanDuel. 14 homers, 23 steals last year. Pretty decent for counting stats. Not a bad triple slash. A lot of plate appearances. Never all that high priced. Fairly easy to get to if you're stacking Giants. Mikey Conforto, 15 home runs, but not much else to speak of in his return to action last year. Patrick Bailey, minor power output for a catcher. Nick Ahmed, total afterthought in the last spot in the lineup. The top-heavy Padres, we saw this lineup a little bit in the Soul Series. Xander Bogaerts got out to a good start. Handful of base hits, some runs scored. Bogey finished at 285, 350, 440 last year after struggling up and down season. 120 WRC plus overall, 19 homers, 19 steals. Turned into a very solid season for Bogey, and he checks in today at just 4,800, 3,300. Just is more applicable to the FanDuel price. It's a fair 4,800 on DraftKings. It's a cheap 3,300 on FanDuel. Fernando Tatis is expensive. 5,800 on the DraftKings slate, 39 on FanDuel. That said, tons of ability. 25 homers, 29 stolen bases, and 635 plate appearances last year. His ISO went to 191. He didn't play at all in 2022. But back in 2021, in 546 plate appearances, he went 42-25 home runs, stolen bases, had a 328 ISO. It's a gigantic Judgian kind of ISO. 156 WRC plus. Superstar by any measure. Still is. I like him to improve on these numbers basically across the board this year. Jake Cronenworth, I think, is wildly miscast as a three-hitter. 229, 312, 378 last year. 10 home runs, 6 steals, a 148 ISO, a 92 WRC plus. Year before that was a little better for power with 17 homers, a 153 ISO, did create runs 10% better than average, but still just 240, 333, 394. Where's the three-hitter here? I really don't see Jake Cronenworth as a serviceable three-hitter for the entire season, but apparently the Pods do. Lefty bat, first base, second base, 2,800 is cheap on FanDuel, 4,100 is cheap on DraftKings for the spot in the lineup between Tatis and Manny Machado. I'd rather have Ha-Seong Kim behind Manny Machado on most days than Jay Cronenworth in a vacuum, but you get the correlation with Machado from Cronenworth. Machado is correctly priced at 5,200, third base shortstop on the DraftKings slate. He's reasonable at 35 on FanDuel. That's about right. 30 home runs last year, 204 ISO, 114 WRC plus. Right about the expectation from Manny Machado again this year. 10.5% barrel rate, 45.9% hard hits last year. Just struck out 18.1% of the time. Easy enough to get to if you're stacking pods. Kim, as mentioned, 17 homers and 38 steals in a very solid breakout season. 112 WRC plus. Didn't hit for a ton of power outside of the 17 home runs. Didn't have any kind of good contact profile to speak of. But a little bit of pop, a little bit of speed, cheap pricing, triple position eligibility on FanDuel. If I'm stacking Padres, he's definitely going to be a part of the equation. He's a reasonable enough talent, especially, he can, not especially against Logan Webb, which is almost what I said, but he's a reasonable enough talent in that he can score without hitting a home run off of a guy like Logan Webb, who limits home runs fairly effectively. If Kim singles twice, steals a base, scores 2 runs, you're home free for value on FanDuel. At 4,600, it's a little more sticky on the DraftKings slate. Second base only. Little tougher to get to over there. Needs to do a little bit more. Jerkson Profar, I think you guys know I despise. 76 WRC plus last year, 9 home runs and 521 plate appearances. Cost me Nolan Jones from the Rockies in the Dynasty League because he stole Nolan Jones' job out of camp last year for some reason for 400 and change plate appearances with the Rockies. Hate that guy. I mean, I don't hate him, but fantasy baseball-wise, I'm not a fan. Luis Camposano, their catcher, 7 home runs in just 174 plate appearances last year, a 134 WRC plus, was putting bat on ball really well in Korea. We'll see what he comes back home with, but there is reasonable expectation for cheap catcher upside. It's more of a, if you go to the Padres play, I don't know that I want off him in any spots, but a capable enough catcher. Tyler Wade, just a mixer with multi-position eligibility. That said, triple position eligibility for the dead minimum at 2,000 on the FanDuel slate has its impact. It's another guy just potentially a lever into other better things. But if you one off Tyler Wade at, say, second base, and you put Garrett Crochet in your pitcher spot, I defy you to even spend all your salary on FanDuel at that point. Outside of just going like one-offs across the board, it's tough. Jackson Merrill won the starting center field job out of camp. Still a shortstop on both sites, though, even though they played in South Korea last week. 33,000 on DraftKings, 2,200 on FanDuel. Top 20 MLB overall prospect. A lot of ceiling on the kid. Looked pretty good. Was absolutely smoking everything he made contact with. I think he came home with 2 hits, like 2 for 10, I want to say. 2 for 8. I think he was 2 for 8, 2 runs scored, and a lot of hard hit baseballs. So potential upside for Jackson Merrill. Rostering him at shortstop, not really problematic given the multi-position eligibility on the other guys and given only 2 outfielders on the team. Not a big issue. On DraftKings, it actually is. Excuse me, I misspoke. Forgot about Bogaerts. Bogaerts is their second baseman this year, but he's also stuck at shortstop until they change it. So that is a positional blocker on DraftKings. You obviously can't have all 3 of those guys. You can't even have 2 of them together. On FanDuel, you can get 2 of them together. You can actually get all 3 of them together if you really wanted. I am not advocating for that. So, Yu Darvish, DraftKings, minor yes. Logan Webb, DraftKings, a little bit more enthusiastic yes. Logan Webb, FanDuel, borderline. It was a little bit too expensive for my tastes. Yu Darvish, probably too expensive for my tastes on FanDuel. Neither stack is a priority, but I think both are playable. More talent on well, it's closer on talent. Padres peak higher, but fall faster. Tatis the best player in this game. 2 to go. Yankees against Framber Valdez. I talked about it at the beginning of the show. The Yankees rate out well in the stacks tool because it's just averaging the projections, and you can see how well all these guys project on FanDuel. So if you get that, well, you got more guys projecting just barely into the high end there, and then you've got 2 guys in the 15 range that are carrying the day and pushing that average way, way up. So the Yanks have a slate leading projection average. We'll see if they can deliver on it. But you got to love this team 1 through 6. Assuming that's the lineup. Do we have the lineup yet? We might have John Birdie in the lineup today. I don't know if he's made it to the team yet. He is not in the lineup today. Oh, but Verdugo is. There's a change there. Let's see what they changed out. All right, so Gleyber, Soto, Judge, Stanton, Rizzo, Volpe is the same, just in a slightly different order, I guess. And then Verdugo dropping into 7th, and Jose Trevino and Oswaldo Cabrera hitting 9th. Oswaldo is a utility player at best, not much of a bat, decent glove man, plays a lot of positions in real life. Will probably have cheap multi-position eligibility, but he's a total afterthought in the Yankees lineup, and a lot of his games are probably going to go to John Birdie now because Birdie's a much, much better player. Jose Trevino, not much of a hitter at the catcher, but a good defensive catcher. We'll see a lot of Trevino this year, but we also do have Austin Wells, the rookie, who is a much, much better hitter. So at a certain point, I expect Wells to overtake the Trevino lineup spot. But that's two fairly soft spots at the bottom of the Yankees lineup today. Verdugo, decent hit tool, if nothing else. 264, 324, 421 last year, 158 ISO, 98 WRC plus. Nice to have another lefty in the lineup, if nothing else, at Yankee Stadium. We know about the short porch. He's a low strikeout guy who puts the ball in play. Hitting him 7th doesn't really pay off that talent, given that he's going to be getting on base ahead of Trevino and Cabrera. But maybe you get the odd slates the odd days where he wraps back around to the top. But the top 6 is where you want to be DFS wise. Gleyber Torres had a phenomenal year last year. Stepped up from a 22.6% strikeout rate in 2022, improved that to a 14.6% rate while pushing his walk rate from 6.8% to 10% last year. Big steps forward. He hit 25 home runs last year, had a 180 ISO, created runs 23% better than average, 25 homers, 13 stolen bases. Does not get credit for how good last year's season was. 4,500 on DraftKings at second base, very affordable in conjunction with Soto and Judge. 3,200 on FanDuel, even more affordable. Other guys like that in this lineup, Giancarlo Stanton at 4,500 on DK, 2,900 on FanDuel. Anthony Rizzo is also at 2,900 on FanDuel and 4,400 on DraftKings. Those are two still very good hitters. Giancarlo Stanton still makes tremendous contact and is capable of hitting a ball out of any park, including Central. Rizzo is still a very good hitter. Rizzo suffered tremendously last year after he was concussed and not diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome. By the time many weeks went by with him still in the lineup and just struggling with obvious issues with his timing, the Yanks finally figured out, maybe it was that bump on the noggin, and he went on the IL for the rest of the season. Before that, he was having a very strong year. He finished at 244, 328, 378 with just 12 home runs. That is not indicative of who Anthony Rizzo is. Anthony Rizzo is still the hitter that's been over 30 home runs a bunch of times in his career. He hit 32 home runs the year before last, 548 plate appearances, a 256 ISO, 132 WRC plus. His average and his on-base percentage weren't great that year. He's a better hitter than he put up that year in terms of just like hit tool hitter. But I have big expectations for Anthony Rizzo from the left side this year. I think 30 home runs are back in play. I think a reasonable 250 plus, 250, 330 is kind of a front end of the triple slash is in play. And then Stanton, again, 24 home runs in 415 plate appearances last year is still very good. 229 ISO is still very good. It's the 191, 275 part of the triple slash that really hurt. The 89 WRC plus. Remember when we were talking about Joey Gallo and how he was at 170 whatever on the front end with just like a 300 on base, but he was still at a 104 WRC plus. Had a similar home run total in far fewer plate appearances. Gallo walks a lot more. He strikes out a lot more, but he also walks a lot more. Really, that's what Stanton needs to figure out is how do I find 4 or 5 additional points of walk rate in with what I'm already doing? Then the 191 wouldn't be as big a deal as it is for him. But still, 15.7% barrels, 48% hard hits. I've been referring to this guy throughout the show and the unassailable, unattainable numbers that he puts up in terms of premium contact. Aaron Judge last year in 458 plate appearances, 27.5% barrel rate, 64.2% hard hits. Year before that, in a bigger sample, 26.2% barrels, 60.9% hard hits. Nobody approaches Aaron Judge for premium contact. In a full season, nobody approaches him for home run total either. 62 home runs 2 years ago and 696 plate appearances. Also, Went 311, 425, 686 that year. It's an under-discussed part of Judge's game. He's a terrific hitter, and he's an on-base machine. When he's not hitting the ball over the wall, he's getting himself to first base. There's a ton of value in that. There's a ton of value in having Judge and Soto hitting back-to-back. This was my dream scenario that I've been talking about on shows in front of you guys for at least 3 or 4 years now. This was the player that I wanted, Juan Soto, to go with Aaron Judge. Get me the left-handed version. Get me Aaron Judge from the left side. Soto's still only 25 years old. 35 home runs last year, 12 steals, a 410 on base, a 245 ISO, created runs 55% better than average, had a 13% barrel rate and 55% hard hits, and now he's hitting in front of Aaron Judge. Look out, league. This is going to be a deadly good lineup if they stay healthy. That said, 6,100, 6,300, they cost a pretty penny. 4,100, 4,300 on FanDuel. But there are guys around them that help average that right down. So they're deceptively easy to get to. And then the last man in here, Anthony Volpe at 3,800. That's very affordable at shortstop on DraftKings, especially for what he did last season. All he did really was counting stats, 21 homers, 24 steals. But those were valuable. He strikes out a little bit too much at 27.8%. He definitely does not hit enough or get on base enough. He's got elite speed. He needs to be on base in the 330s somewhere. And then we'll see this stolen base total tick up into the 40s, if not higher. I think he's got additional upside for power this year. That was expected. Had a 42.7% hard hit last year with a 9% barrel. Won himself a gold glove, but that doesn't count for anything that we do. 2,500 on FanDuel, pretty cheap for those counting stats and that upside. 3,800 on DraftKings, pretty cheap. The issue with all of these Yankees, and the reason that I mentioned the thing about how they project today, is Framber Valdez on the other side. Right? Framber is very, very good at limiting home run power. It's kind of like Logan Webb. 2 years ago, he was at a 2.10% home run rate and a negative 5.5 degree average launch angle. Everything just mashed into the ground. 44.4% hard hits, nearly 91 miles an hour of exit velo on average, but just 2.10% home runs, and he pitched to a 3.14 ERA and a 3.58 xFIP with a 21.9% strikeout rate while walking a few too many guys. 2.82 ERA and a 3.0 xFIP in 2022 over 201 and a third innings, 31 starts, pushed the strikeout rate up a little bit to 23.5%, lost a little bit of that average launch angle, negative 3.6%, negative 3.6 degrees is still totally spectacular, just 1.33% home runs, despite still 41.4% hard hits, nearly 90 miles an hour of exit velo on average. Last year it spiked a little bit. He was a little bit more gettable last year. 4.2 degree average launch, 7.9% barrel rate, 45.1% hard hit, 91.5 miles an hour of exit velo. All of those are up. So that's a little bit concerning for him. It spiked him to a 2.35% home run rate, the highest mark in the last 3 seasons, but still nowhere near tragic. 3.45 ERA and a 3.39 xFIP, still very, very strong. 1.13 whip, up to a 24.8% strikeout rate. So in with the minor concerns around contact and premium contact and a little bit of extra power allowed, there are improvements across the board in a lot of other categories. So I still consider Framber to be pretty high end here. He's only 8,000 on the DraftKings slate. As good as Aaron Judge is at everything, he still does strike out 28.4% of the time. He walks 19.2%. Gleyber doesn't strike out. Soto doesn't strike out. And then the bottom of the lineup doesn't really strike out that much. But in the middle of the lineup, some of those key hitters do have some strikeouts on them. So you get Framber on a day where he goes six and change. He is one of the pitchers more capable of working deep into a game. Just induce ground ball after ground ball, find your strikeouts, limit the Yankees' power upside. I could see Framber having a day for 8,000 on DraftKings. I don't know how much I'd get him at 9,000 on FanDuel. He projects out fairly well, but again, it just puts him like in the mix with all these guys. I prefer Raggins against Minnesota. I prefer Lusardo against Pittsburgh. I prefer these guys at higher prices. Framber's on the board, but I think I'll probably just take my Homer Yankee bat shares. The Yankees are starting Nestor Cortez, unfortunately. Not a lot of faith in that spot. Not DFS-wise, not real baseball-wise. We got our nice story season and a half, whatever it was, out of Nestor. makes up pitches on the fly, changes his arm angle. He's an interesting pitcher to watch. Doesn't really project well, missed most of last year. In the innings he pitched, 25.2% strikeouts is good, but give up a 4.14% home run rate that is alarming, 4.97 ERA and a 4.84 xFIP, 1.25 whip. He was not that good last year. He's very, very gettable. Starting on opening day because Garrett Cole is hurt and Marcus Stroman didn't want to apparently. So he picks up the start. But I think I'm much more firmly on the Astros bat side of this equation. You can see the 12.92 for Jordan Alvarez sticking out in the home run model, one of the top marks of the day, if not the top overall mark of the day. Kyle Tucker just under the magic number at 9.35. Both of these lefties are spectacular at hitting fellow lefties, which Nestor Cortez is. No downgrade for those two lefties whatsoever in this scenario. Everybody else in the lineup is right-handed, and some of them are very good right-handed hitters. So, yeah, Astros stack looks pretty decent. Nestor, not so much. 7,900, probably too much to pay for him on FanDuel, one of the lower projected pitchers on the entire slate. 6,800, maybe he mixes in for a few shares at SP2 on DraftKings, but total non-priority with very low expectations of success. Down bottom of the board here. Him and Miles Michaelis bringing up the bottom. We'll talk about Michaelis in a second. This terrific Astros lineup. Let's see if we've got the confirmed. We probably do. Yes, we do. It's probably the same. Nope, slightly different. Same guy, slightly different order. Jose Altuve off the top. Another tremendous year last year. 311, 393, 522. Creator runs 54% better than average. Hitting ahead of Jordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker back to back. You can see what the Astros think of the lefty-lefty matchup by sliding Kyle Tucker up and hitting him directly after another lefty. I'm telling you, those guys do not suffer for facing fellow lefties. Alvarez hit 31 home runs last year. Remember when I said he's one of the guys who rivals or comes somewhat near rivaling Judge for that premium contact? You can spot the difference since they're on the same page. Here's Judge and here's Jordan, but these are still among the highest numbers in the league. The year before he was better, 21%, and nearly 60%. Still fell short of Judge, but a monster power hitter in his own right, and a very good hitter overall. 293, 407, 583 last year, a 290 ISO, a 170 WRC plus, only struck out 18.5% and walked 13.9%. That's an attribute that's common to all four of their top hitters here. Altuve, Alvarez, Tucker, and Bregman all struck out less than 18.5% of the time or less, and two of them significantly less, and all walked better than 10.7%, and three of them significantly better than 10.7%. It's a tremendous quartet of players. They're very expensive, but justifiably so. $5,400 average, 21.9 for those four on DraftKings, and then you include one of these two maybe with it. On FanDuel, average 3,800, 15.3 for the four-man stack total. Jose Abreu had a disastrous season that he pulled together a little bit for home run power at the end of the year last year to kind of mask the rest of these numbers. Finished the season with 18 home runs, still managed to get himself to 90 RBIs. That's completely attributable to the talent ahead of him in the lineup. He did nothing last year. 146 ISO, 86 WRC plus. If you remember, we were talking about it. It extended back into the end of his previous season with the White Sox. The power was just gone. His ability to hit the baseball was just gone. And he rediscovered it a little bit down the stretch. Maybe there's expectation of a resurgence here. He was formerly a very, very good hitter. So I think we can expect a little bit better in the average in the on-base department, which would drive the WRC+. plus. We can maybe expect a little bit more power from him. So at least one to watch, if not roster at just 2,800 at first base on FanDuel, 4,100 on DraftKings. He is discounted for all those struggles. So if you have any faith in Jose Abreu, you can definitely click him in alongside these other guys. Chas McCormick had a breakout season, was one of our secret down the lineup stashy kind of guys for a long, long time. Made very, very good premium contact for a couple seasons in a row. Finished last year with 22 homers, 19 steals, a 216 ISO, a 133 WRC plus, and 457 plate appearances. Get him in the lineup for 600 plate appearances. Let's see what he can do. Jainer Diaz. Standout catcher last year, 377 plate appearances, a terrific triple slash, 23 home runs, a 127 WRC plus, a 256 ISO. Very good marks for premium contact. He's only 3,000 where you actually need catchers. It's one of the better catcher options on the slate at price. 2,600 where you don't actually need catchers. Still looks pretty good if you're stacking Astros. Jeremy Pena, it's all right. 10 homers, 13 steals, kind of a disappointing year. Just a 118 ISO last year, 4% worse than average creating runs. An okay triple slash. needs help from his friends to really pay off a DFS roster spot. Jake Myers, capable of knocking one out of the park from time to time from the right side of the plate, but kind of an afterthought in this spot. He is very cheap. Maybe he wraps you around back to the top, but he only had a 296 on base, so you're not doing yourself any favors expecting him to get back to the top of the lineup to provide correlated scoring. Fromber, yes. Astros, yes. Yankees, yes. Nestor, no. 3 of those are pretty big yeses, though. Especially Fromber on DK at 8,000. Last game up, gang. What's going on in the chat? Kundacker says, yeah, my opening day excitement is very shook by this matchup, but just glad to have meaningful baseball back. I'm with you. Yeah, it's looking forward to the Yankees getting out of Houston. Could be an ugly start to the season. But hopefully the bats play anyway. Hugo Echeverria. Happy opening day. A little late to the show, but ready to embrace the variance. There you go, buddy. Got the right attitude coming in. Sherman W. Anderson, just catching up with things that have happened quite a while ago at this point. Whoa, Terry Nomo Osimo. Yeah. It's been a while, man. Been out of there. Well, rotoscouts, this is actually the 1-year anniversary of rotoscouts being launched as a actual website. I registered the Twitter handle, I think, back in like 2011. That's why the Twitter handle looks old with no followers. But opening day last year, I launched the site, rotoscouts.com. You get projections, pitcher projections, hitter projections, home run picks, power index, top stacks model. My ridiculously long, way too long, probably not enough time left to read it before the Slate Locks article going through all these games, hitter by hitter, game by game. It's all up on the site for free right now. Follow at Rotoscouts Twitter. Retweet and like when you see things pop up. Helps us spread the word. At some point, maybe there will be a little minor charge for these things as we go forward with projections being available and all of it being available, but today, at the very least, it's free. Our pals over at AceMind, by the way, we don't have any sim results up. I didn't have time to get to it, but acemind.io for your sims needs and for an optimizer. We use it all the time for NBA. We've been using it all season on NBA shows. If you go to acemind.io and you plug in rotoscouts, all caps, rotoscouts, just like it looks on the screen there, as your promo code, not only do you get the standard first 3 days for free that they always offer, but you get 20% off your first month with promo code rotoscouts, and it helps us out a little bit. And those guys are great dudes, and it's a good product. So, like supporting them. All right, last game up. Enough business out of the way. Do we have lineups? We do. Full lineups for both of these teams. Let me grab these. Speed burner available on the FanDuel slate in this game. It's going to be an interesting spot. There's the cards. So, the guy I'm talking about, Victor Scott, hitting 8th for the Cardinals today. Dude stole 90-something bases, 97, I want to say, across 2 levels in the minors last year. That's, if you're not familiar with baseball, that's a lot of stolen bases. Blazing speed. Him and Estuary Ruiz going to compete all season for the overall season lead, stolen bases lead if they both get regular plate appearances. Whether he does or not, when everybody's back to full health, he's here right now because he's filling in. They've got a few injured players. But whether he continues to get plate appearances probably depends on what he produces over this stretch. Left-handed bat, fills in the outfield, dead minimum price, again, for a guy who stole, I think, 97 bases across 2 minor league levels last year. Tons and tons of speed. Can't steal first base, though, so got to get on base. We'll see what happens with him. The Cards go up against Tyler Glasnow in this spot. Glasnow's the only pitcher worth talking about in this game. 9-5 on DraftKings, 10,000 on FanDuel. Also, not a great game in his sole start. Went deeper into the game than Yu Darvish did. Gave up 2 earned runs. I think a pair of hits. I think he walked 4, struck out 3, I want to say, and went 5 innings. Reasonable upside for 6 innings, I think, here. He pitched 120 last year, struck out 33.4% of opposing hitters, 2.75 xFIP, a 3.53 ERA. He's a dominant pitcher on the right day. That's why the Dodgers made him one of their many, many big free agent signings this year. So Glasnow, I think you go right back to the well with him. He's very high priced, but probably pretty worth it against this Cards team. There are bats that I like on this Cards team, but given where he projects for the money comparative to other guys on this slate, I think he's got probably the highest individual strikeout upside or close to it. One of the top options on the slate overall. Miles Michaelis against the Dodgers, I wouldn't roster if you paid me. He did complete 201 and a third innings and made 35 starts last year. He also had a 15.9% strikeout rate, a 4.78 ERA, and a 4.76 xFIP. He allowed a 3.02% home run rate, which on its own is fine, but 90.4 miles an hour of exit velo is too much. 42.8% hard hits is too much on a 15-degree average launch angle that's home run leaning trajectory and a 9.8% barrel rate. You cannot throw that against this Dodgers team. This is an all-star team. So no Miles Michaelis for me, even at 58 on DraftKings, even if as a total dart throw, like eyes closed, spin me around 6 times, make me chug 3 beers, and then I'll throw the dart kind of a dart throw. Maybe you can hit the board barely at 5,800, but I do not like it at all. Cardinals bats. I like Brendan Donovan in the leadoff role. I love the triple position eligibility for 2,700 on FanDuel. He had 11 home runs in 371 plate appearances last year. Pretty good bat, pretty good on base skills, and was increasing his power a little bit. Pushed up to a 40.6% hard hit rate last season before missing a reasonable amount of time. So I don't dislike it. I like him hitting ahead of Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman, Nolan Arenado. You can see the big power mark for Nolan Gorman. Gorman hit 27 home runs last season with a 241 ISO, led the team in both categories. Paul Goldschmidt had 25 home runs, down to a 179 ISO, but still maintained a 122 WRC+. Arenado hit 26 homers, 193 ISO, but just a 107 WRC+. Still above average, but not the Nolan Arenado of old. I do think there's some expectation for a little bit of additional upward run from either of those guys. Season's got to go right for two players that are on the wrong side of 30. Goldschmidt, I believe, is on the wrong side of 35 at this point. What is he? Might be on the wrong side of 38. No, 36. 36 and a half. So, the old versions of these two players aren't necessarily coming back by any means, but reasonable expectation for at least around this, and I do think there's still some lingering 30 home run upside for both of them. Gorman, I expect to get to 30 home runs this year. If he sees 500 plate appearances, he should be at 30 home runs. 16.5% barrel rate, 48.5% hard hits. I believe the top home run mark among second basemen on the entire slate. He's outpacing Brandon Lau by like a full point in the home run model. He only costs $3,300. He's got eligibility at second and third. Don't dislike that. $4,200 on DraftKings is a good price as well. Arenado and Goldschmidt coming off of those seasons being in the 5s is a little bit pricey, but it's okay because everybody around him is cheap. So if you wanted to roster cards against Glass now, have at it. Those are the guys to roster. I would go straight down the line with those 5 hitters. And then you got your wild cards down here. Alec Burleson is cheap, but he's a first baseman on DraftKings for 29. He's got outfield and first base for 24 on FanDuel, makes him a little bit more playable. I don't see a world where I want Alec Burleson over Paul Goldschmidt, even with the price difference. Jordan Walker had a pretty decent year. Broke camp with the team, was expected to be a top-end prospect, struggled, got sent back down, eventually got recalled, ended up finishing the year at 276, 342, 445, 116 WRC+, 16 homers, 7 steals. Pretty serviceable. 4,200 in the outfield on DraftKings, 2,700 in the outfield on FanDuel. No issues with that play, 42.5% hard hits. I think there's only upward trajectory for Jordan Walker. He was a highly regarded prospect, and I don't know if he's totally under the radar, but I don't think he's been a major talking point for a lot of people. Mason Wynn, bottom of the lineup, kind of an afterthought. And then the guy I was talking about, Victor Scott, for the dead men. You need him to reach first base, and if he reaches first, he's got a good shot at reaching third, just on his own. So there is significant stolen base upside, if nothing else, for the dead minimum price. But he could very easily go 0 for 4 against Tyler Glass now, 0 for 3 and get pinch hit for. All of that is on the table. Big basement with a respectable size attic based on his stolen base upside and maybe some runs. And then just fire away with the Dodgers wherever you can afford them. They're extremely expensive, justifiably so. The top 3 hitters in the Dodgers lineup cost a total of $18,800 with an average of $6,200 on DraftKings and $12,800 with an average of $4,200 on FanDuel. They're extremely expensive, but those are 3 superstars. By any measure, those are 3 superstars. When you're talking about Freddie Freeman, who went 331, 410, 567 with a 235 ISO and created runs 63% better than average last year while hitting 29 home runs and stealing 23 bases as the 3rd best player of any group, you know that is a 3-star group for sure. Shohei Ohtani, grabbing AL MVP and sticking him in between Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. It's an embarrassment of riches. Ohtani, one of the better home run marks on the entire slate at 11.1, one of the highest overall raw projections, also one of the highest overall prices, but the guy's coming off 44 home runs, 20 stolen bases, a 180 WRC plus, a 350 ISO. He's an absolute monster. Didn't do much that I remember top of the head in the Korea series. Mookie killed it in the Korea series. Freddie had a decent series, I think. Trying to remember. This was a week ago. Gotta forgive me. But yeah, all three of those guys in any combination that you can get them. The multi-position on Mookie and Shohei helps a little bit on DraftKings. Triple position on Mookie is helpful on the FanDuel slate. He'll probably switch to shortstop eligibility in the next couple of days on DraftKings. That's his primary position this year. Will Smith just signed a monster extension. 10 years for a catcher is crazy when that's going to take him through his age 37 season. But he's another guy. 554 plate appearances from the catcher position last year. Hit 261, 359, 438, 119 WRC plus. Knocked 19 balls over the wall. 16.1% strikeout rate with an 11.4% walk rate. 16% last year as well. Tremendous hitter at the catcher spot. 4,800 is affordable for him on DraftKings. 3,400 is even better on FanDuel where you don't need catchers. Max Muncy from the left side, 3 true outcomes hitter. 36 home runs last year, 212, 333, 475, created runs 18% better than average. Struck out 26.4% of the time, not as aggressively high as your Joey Gallos of the world. 14.7% walk rate is very, very strong. 14.6% barrels, 46% hard hits. Max Muncy is a premium power bat on any given slate, really. For 36 at third base on FanDuel, 48 at third on DraftKings, very playable today. Teoscar Hernandez, another guy with a premium contact profile. Strikes out a ton, 31% strikeout without a lot of walks. So that hurts him, but he still puts up good numbers. 105 WRC plus last year, 26 home runs last year. Year before that, he had 25 home runs. Year before that, 32 home runs. This is a significant power bat to just be kind of dropped into this lineup as like, we can have Teoscar too? I guess. Why not? He wants to come here? Sure, let's give him some money. Not a bad option. 5,000 on the DraftKings slate, 3,000. Much more affordable on FanDuel. Much more playable on the FanDuel slate. Downright difficult to get to, especially in combination with the other hitters in this lineup above him on DraftKings. James Outman. We're almost there. James Outman, 4,400 on DraftKings, 2,800 on FanDuel. I like him a lot. I think he's got easy, 25, 20 kind of upside. It won't be easy for him, but he's got clear, apparent 25, 20 kind of upside. Went 23-16 just last year in 567 plate appearances. Kind of locked into the everyday center field job. Should be a regular power bat that I loved for season long, and I am going to definitely get to when he's this cheap. 2,800 in the outfield on FanDuel. 4,400 is a lot higher on DraftKings. Still playable over there, but downright inexpensive on the FanDuel slate. Makes him very appealing in Dodger stacks for me. Jason Hayward, a little bit of a resurgence. 15 home runs, 377 plate appearances last year. Was signed mostly to play defense, but they'll take the additional power output that he provided in a bit of a surprise. And then Gavin Lux, widely regarded for a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, good like mid-range option in both of those things. Didn't play at all last year, missed the entire season with injury. Just 6 home runs and 7 stolen bases, over 471 plate appearances last year, 7 and 4 in 381 the year before that. So this is a show me season for Gavin Lux. We need to, the hype has to be proven real at a certain point. So didn't really deliver those 2 years. Got an opportunity to come back and do it this year after missing all of last year. I would play Gavin Lux for 2,600 at second base, 3,400 at second base, or shortstop on DraftKings. So this last game, Tyler Glasnow, big yes. Dodgers an extremely big yes if you can manage to afford it. Dodgers and Reds I love as a combination. It's difficult to afford, but on FanDuel at least, the path to affording that runs through Mr. Garrett Crochet. Miles Michaelis, do not play. Cardinals bats, an afterthought at best. A couple shares. They're not bad. Goldschmidt, Gorman, Arenado, and then like one of Donovan, maybe Wilson Contreras, who I don't think we talked about, or maybe like Jordan Walker or the wild card Victor Scott on the FanDuel slate. That said, gang, 150, 2-hour and 47-minute show to start the season. Not bad. I got to get some updates in, and then I got to start building some lineups. Otherwise, the slate's going to lock without me. So I'm going to punch out. I'm going to tell you guys that the overall home run call, it's up on the website, but it was Christian Encarnacion Strand, one of the lower-owned Reds. Love that kid this year. Tons and tons of upside. like Joey Gallo on the other side of that game for a cheap home run. Home run picks are up on the site. Projections are about to be updated for hitter projections on the site. Totally free. Pitcher projections are on the site. Totally free. The way too long 12,000 word analysis of all these games is on the site. Totally free. Top Stacks is on the site. Totally free. Whatever else you can find up there. Free of charge. rotoscouts.com. Go check it out. At rotoscouts is the Twitter handle. Follow that. Go Yankees, like Gundacker said. Thank you for that, Gun. Almost forgot to say that. Let's go Yanks. I'm going to build lineups, have some lunch, watch that game, and then pass the hell out. And then we're just going to repeat this entire thing tomorrow and for the next, 200 days or so in a row? Can't wait. It's going to be fun. Good luck out there, gang. Opening day. Have fun. Good luck. Build good lineups. Somebody go win something. See you tomorrow. Oh, NBA projections will be up. It's a 2-game slate tonight, thankfully. So I'm going to throw projections up later in the day. No show for NBA tonight. Probably not tomorrow. We'll see about the rest of the season. Out of here. See ya.